They say a single moment can destroy you. For Evelyn Carter, it was the second red wine splashed across her white dress at the Ashford Garden Ball. But it wasn't the stain that nearly ended her, it was the laughter. The way the elite circle closed in like wolves scenting blood. The way hands that had once held champagne flutes now pointed, mocked, erased her from existence. In a world where power is the only currency and weakness is a death sentence, Evelyn was seconds from annihilation. Until he walked in. Stay until the end to see how this moment changed everything. Drop your city in the comments and smash that like button if you're ready for this story. The Ashford estate glittered like a predator's smile. Evelyn Carter had learned early that beauty in this world was a weapon, and tonight the Ashford Garden Ball was dressed to kill. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across marble floors polished to mirrors. The gardens beyond the terrace were a maze of sculpted hedges and imported roses that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Every surface gleamed, every guest sparkled. Even the air smelled expensive, jasmine and old money and something darker underneath that Evelyn couldn't quite name. She stood near the fountain, champagne glass warming in her hand, watching the dance of power play out in real time. Did you see Margaret's necklace? 300,000, minimum. Darling, that's nothing. The Hawthorns just purchased another estate in the Cotswolds. I heard the Bishops lost half their portfolio in that mining disaster. Tragic, really. The voices washed over her like toxic perfume. This was how they did it. Casual mentions of wealth so vast it became abstract, dropped between sips of Dom Perignon like gossip about the weather. Evelyn had been attending these events for 2 years now, ever since her uncle's modest success in shipping had earned her a toehold in this glittering hell. She'd learned the rules fast: speak little, smile often, never let them see you calculate the cost of everything around you. She was tolerated, not accepted, never that, but tolerated as long as she stayed quiet and didn't reach for things above her station. Tonight felt different, though, sharper somehow. "Evelyn, darling," Lady Pemberton swept toward her, silk rustling like snake scales. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. "I was just telling Constance about your charming little dress. So, practical." The other women laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Evelyn's dress was white, deliberately simple, elegant in its restraint. She'd chosen it carefully, knowing anything too flashy would be torn apart, anything too plain would be mocked. White was supposed to be safe. Classic, untouchable. She should have known better. "Thank you, Lady Pemberton," Evelyn said, her voice steady even as her fingers tightened on the champagne stem. "I thought simplicity might be refreshing." Oh, how refreshing. Constance Ashford materialized at Lady Pemberton's elbow, her emerald dress probably worth more than Evelyn's entire wardrobe. "In a sea of diamonds and silk, you certainly stand out." More laughter, closer now. The circle was forming. Evelyn had seen this happen before, to others, never to her. It started with comments that could almost be compliments, words with edges sharp enough to draw blood without leaving visible wounds. Then the circle would close tighter and tighter, until the target was drowning in velvet cruelty and nowhere to breathe. "I think it's brave," someone else chimed in. Victoria Blackwell, if Evelyn remembered correctly. Old money, older spite. "Not everyone can afford to keep up with fashion. Some of us have to make do with what we have." The words hung in the air like a noose. "Actually," Evelyn started, but Lady Pemberton cut her off with a wave of her bejeweled hand. "No need to explain, dear. We all understand your situation." Her eyes glittered. "Your uncle's shipping business is doing well, I hear. Third-tier contracts with the Merchants Guild. How industrious." There it was, the real blow. In this world, working for money, actually working, was the ultimate mark of inferiority. These people didn't work. They inherited. They invested. They collected wealth like other people collected dust, passively, inevitably, without effort. Evelyn's uncle had built his business from nothing. He'd earned every contract through intelligence and persistence. She was proud of him. But pride meant nothing here. "The Merchants Guild is very selective," Evelyn said carefully. "Oh, I'm sure they are." Constance's smile could have cut diamonds. "It's so important to have standards, even in commerce." The circle had fully formed now. 8, maybe 10 women, all glittering and sharp and watching her with the focused attention of cats watching a mouse. The men were elsewhere, discussing politics or business, or whatever it was men with real power discussed when they weren't watching their wives destroy people for sport. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face blank. Don't react. Don't give them the satisfaction. Well, she said, aiming for light and landing somewhere in the vicinity of desperate, I should probably... That's when it happened. Later, Evelyn would wonder if it was planned, if Constance had orchestrated the whole thing with the precision of a general planning a siege. But in the moment, all she registered was the sudden movement, the flash of red, and then ice-cold liquid cascading down her chest. Wine. Red wine. Across her white dress. The stain spread like blood, soaking through silk that had cost her 3 months of careful saving, dark and damning and impossible to miss. Oh my goodness! Constance's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with theatrical shock. I'm so sorry! How clumsy of me! But there was no apology in her voice, only satisfaction. The laughter started immediately. Not loud, these people were too refined for that, but cutting. Whispers and giggles and barely concealed sneers that sliced through Evelyn's defenses like hot knives through butter. How unfortunate. What a mess. Poor thing. Perhaps she can have it cleaned, if she can afford it. Evelyn stood frozen, wine dripping from her bodice to pool at her feet. The stain was enormous, obscene against the white fabric. She looked down at herself and saw exactly what they saw. A girl who didn't belong, marked and ruined and exposed. Her voice came out strangled. It's fine. I just need to... Oh, don't leave on our account, Lady Pemberton purred. I'm sure no one will notice. Another wave of laughter, sharper now, crueler. Evelyn's face burned. She wanted to run, to disappear, to be anywhere but here. But moving would mean pushing through the circle, and they'd closed ranks tight. Bodies in expensive gowns formed a wall of silk and malice, trapping her in the center like a specimen under glass. Actually, Victoria Blackwell said thoughtfully, perhaps it's better if she does leave. That stain is rather distracting, and we wouldn't want to ruin Lady Ashford's lovely party with such an unsightly display. I agree, someone else said. It's best if people know their place, and clearly, this isn't hers. The words landed like physical blows. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. Not her spirit exactly, but the careful armor she'd built over 2 years of smiling through contempt. The belief that if she was quiet enough, polite enough, graceful enough, they might accept her. She'd been a fool. You're right, Evelyn heard herself say. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I should go. She took a step toward the edge of the circle, but hands stopped her. Not physically, they'd never be so crude, but the wall of bodies shifted, tightened. Lady Pemberton angled her shoulder just enough to block the path. Constance moved her glass to create an obstacle. Small movements, deniable if questioned, but effective. They weren't going to let her leave with dignity. They were going to make her push through, make her look desperate and panicked and weak. Excuse me, Evelyn said, hating the tremor in her voice. No one moved. I said excuse. I don't think you understand, dear. Lady Pemberton's voice dropped to something almost gentle, which made it worse somehow. This isn't about a dress. This is about knowing your place. You've been playing at being one of us for far too long. Tonight, that ends. The circle pressed closer. Evelyn could smell their perfume, could see the gleam of satisfaction in their eyes. This wasn't casual cruelty anymore. This was calculated destruction. Your uncle's business is failing, Victoria said matter-of-factly. The Merchants Guild is dropping his contracts next quarter. Did you know that? Evelyn's blood ran cold. That's not... It is, actually. My husband sits on the guild board. The decision was made last week. Victoria's smile was almost kind. So whatever little fantasy you've been living, whatever hope you had of climbing higher, it's over. You're nobody, and now everyone will know it. The words hit like a physical assault. Evelyn felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Her uncle hadn't said anything, but then he wouldn't. He'd protect her from bad news until the last possible moment. If this was true, I can see it in your face, Lady Pemberton said softly. The moment you realize you've been living on borrowed time. It's quite fascinating, really, like watching a tower collapse. Evelyn's hands shook. The empty champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was obscenely loud in the sudden silence. Everyone stared, not just the circle. Everyone. The entire ballroom had turned to watch. Hundreds of eyes, all fixed on the girl in the stained dress standing in a pool of broken glass and spilled wine. This was it. The moment of complete annihilation. I think, Constance said, her voice carrying across the silent room, we should call for the servants. This mess needs to be cleaned up, along with anyone who doesn't belong here. The crowd murmured agreement. Evelyn saw it in their faces, the collective decision that she was finished. Tomorrow, invitations would be revoked. Doors would close. Whatever fragile social standing she'd built would evaporate like morning frost. She'd be erased. No. The word came from somewhere deep inside her, some part that refused to break even when everything else was shattering. Evelyn lifted her chin, meeting Constance's gaze directly. I'll leave, she said, her voice stronger now. But not because you're sending me away. Because I choose to. It was a small rebellion, meaningless in the grand scheme, but it was hers. She took a step forward, and this time the circle parted. Just barely, grudgingly, but enough. Evelyn walked through, her head high despite the wine staining her dress and the tears burning behind her eyes. The crowd watched in silence. She could feel their judgment like weight on her shoulders, pressing her down with every step. The doors to the terrace seemed impossibly far away. She was halfway there when the whispers started again. Did you see her face? Absolutely pathetic. Well, that's the last we'll see of her. Good riddance to bad breeding. Each word was a nail in a coffin. Evelyn kept walking, kept her eyes forward, kept breathing even though her chest felt like it was collapsing. Just a few more steps. Just a little further. She reached for the terrace door handle, and the entire room went silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from before. This was different. Heavier. Dangerous. Evelyn froze, her hand on the brass handle. Something had changed. The air itself felt different, charged, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Slowly, she turned around. The crowd had parted down the middle, creating a pathway from the main entrance to where Evelyn stood. And at the far end of that pathway, framed in the doorway like a figure from a nightmare or a fever dream, stood a man. He was tall, taller than anyone else in the room, with the kind of presence that made everything else fade to background noise. Dark hair, darker eyes, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her uncle's house. But it wasn't the clothes or the height or even the sharp, aristocratic features that made Evelyn's breath catch. It was the way everyone was looking at him, like he was a predator that had just walked into a room full of prey. Duke Wolfe, someone whispered, the name carrying through the silence like a warning. Evelyn's heart stopped. She'd heard of Dominic Wolfe. Everyone had. He was a legend in this world, the youngest duke in 3 generations, a man who'd taken a struggling title and turned it into an empire through ruthlessness and brilliant strategy. He didn't attend social events. He didn't need to. People came to him, begged for his attention, his favor, his money, and he never, ever intervened in petty social games. So why was he here? Why was he looking directly at her? Dominic Wolfe crossed the room in long, measured strides. The crowd melted away from him like snow under a blowtorch. Evelyn watched him approach, her mind blank with shock and wine-soaked humiliation. He stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he was even more intimidating, not because of his size, though he towered over her, but because of the cold intelligence in his eyes. This was a man who calculated everything, who saw through pretense and performance to the brutal truth underneath. Those eyes traveled over her, the stained dress, the broken glass at her feet, the barely concealed trembling in her hands, and something flickered across his face. Not pity. Something harder, sharper. Recognition. "Miss Carter," he said. His voice was deep, controlled, and carried across the silent ballroom like a pronouncement. "I apologize for my lateness." Evelyn blinked. "What?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. The entire room held its breath as he opened it, revealing a ring, gold, heavy, with a seal carved into dark onyx. His signet ring. "I believe," Dominic Wolfe said, his eyes never leaving hers, "we have an arrangement to discuss." And before Evelyn could process what was happening, before she could speak or protest or understand, he took her wine-stained hand in his and slid the ring onto her finger. The room erupted, but Evelyn barely heard it. She was staring at the ring, the symbol of the Duke's house, his protection, his claim, sitting on her finger like it belonged there, like she belonged to him. She looked up, questions and shock and desperate confusion fighting for dominance in her mind. "I don't understand." "You will." Dominic's hand tightened slightly on hers, not painful, but firm, unbreakable. "But first, I think we should address the mess someone made of my evening." He turned to face the crowd, and Evelyn saw something she'd never seen before in this room full of predators and power players. She saw fear. "Lady Pemberton," Dominic said, his voice conversational but carrying an edge that could cut steel. "How unfortunate that you've become so clumsy in your old age, spilling wine, causing scenes. Perhaps it's time to retire from society before your reputation suffers further damage." Lady Pemberton went white. "Your Grace, And Constance Ashford." He shifted his attention to their hostess, who looked like she might faint. "I'm disappointed. I expected better hospitality from someone whose family owes me, what was it, £300,000 in outstanding loans?" Constance made a strangled sound. Around them, the crowd buzzed with new whispers. Not about Evelyn anymore, but about debts and power and the sudden, shocking reversal playing out in front of them. "As for the rest of you," Dominic continued, his gaze sweeping across the assembled elite like a blade, "I suggest you remember this moment. Remember what happens when you mistake tolerance for weakness, when you confuse silence for consent." His hand was still holding Evelyn's. She could feel the weight of the ring, the heat of his palm, the way the entire room had tilted on its axis. "Miss Carter is under my protection now," Dominic said, and there was no room for argument in his tone. "Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to discuss it with me personally." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then, like dominoes falling, the crowd began to bow. First the men, then the women, all of them acknowledging the power shift that had just occurred. The girl they'd been destroying moments ago was now untouchable, because he'd made her so. Evelyn stood in the center of it all, wine-stained and trembling and completely lost. This wasn't salvation. This was something else entirely, something that felt more like falling from one fire into another. "Come," Dominic said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "We're leaving." He led her through the parted crowd, through the ballroom that had witnessed her humiliation and her impossible rescue, out into the night air that smelled of roses and rain. A car waited, sleek, black, expensive. Of course. Dominic opened the door for her, and Evelyn hesitated. "I don't understand what's happening." "I know." He waited, patient but immovable. "But you're out of options, Miss Carter. You can go back in there and face what they'll do to you, or you can get in the car and find out what I want." It wasn't really a choice. They both knew it. Evelyn looked back at the Ashford estate, glittering and beautiful, and full of people who'd been ready to destroy her. Then she looked at the man who'd just upended everything, whose ring sat heavy on her finger, whose eyes held secrets and calculations she couldn't begin to guess. She got in the car. As they pulled away from the estate, Evelyn watched the lights fade in the rearview mirror. Behind her was a world that had never wanted her. Ahead was something unknown, something dangerous, something that might be worse than anything she'd left behind. The ring caught the streetlight as the car turned, gleaming like a brand or a promise or a chain. Evelyn didn't know which yet, but she was about to find out. The silence in the car was suffocating. Evelyn sat rigid in the leather seat, her wine-stained dress clinging to her skin, hyper-aware of every breath she took. The ring on her finger felt impossibly heavy, like it was dragging her hand down, pulling her towards something she couldn't escape. Outside, the city blurred past in streaks of gold and shadow, familiar streets suddenly looking foreign in the darkness. Dominic sat across from her in the spacious rear compartment, his posture relaxed in a way that somehow made him more intimidating. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the Ashford estate, just sat there, watching her with those calculating eyes that seemed to see straight through her skull into every terrified thought ricocheting through her mind. Finally, Evelyn couldn't take it anymore. "What did you just do?" Her voice came out sharper than she'd intended, edged with panic she couldn't quite suppress. "What the hell was that back there?" One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. "I would think that was obvious." "Nothing about that was obvious." The words burst out of her like steam from a valve. "You walked into that ballroom, put your ring on my finger, and claimed—" "What? What exactly did you claim?" "Protection." The word was simple, final. Like it explained everything. It explained nothing. "I don't need your protection," Evelyn said, even though they both knew it was a lie. Even though 30 minutes ago she'd been seconds away from complete social annihilation. "I don't even know you." "No," Dominic agreed, "but I know you." That stopped her cold. "What?" He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. The movement brought him closer, made the car feel even smaller. "Evelyn Carter, 23 years old, niece to Marcus Carter of Carter Shipping. You've been attending society events for 2 years, always on the periphery, always careful. You smile when they insult you. You laugh when they mock you. You never push back." Each word landed like a blow. Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap, nails digging into her palms. "You've been watching me?" "I've been watching everyone." His tone suggested this should be obvious. "It's how I survive in that world. By knowing who has power, who wants it, and who's smart enough to deserve it. And which category do I fall into?" Something flickered in his eyes, not quite a smile, but close. "The dangerous one. The one people underestimate." Evelyn laughed, but it came out bitter and raw. "Did you miss the part where I was just publicly destroyed? Where I was about to be thrown out like garbage?" "I saw exactly what happened." Dominic's voice dropped, took on an edge that made her breath catch. "I saw you stand in the middle of a circle of predators and refuse to break. I saw you walk away with your head up even when they were shredding you to pieces. That's not weakness, Miss Carter. That's steel wrapped in silk." The words hit her somewhere deep, in a place she'd been protecting for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed. For 2 years she'd made herself small, made herself palatable, convinced herself that surviving meant bending until she almost broke. And this man, this stranger who ruled through fear and power, was telling her she'd been strong all along. It was too much, too confusing. "Why?" Evelyn's voice cracked on the word. "Why did you help me?" Dominic studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sat back, and the distance felt deliberate, calculated. "Because I have use for someone like you," he said finally, "and because watching those vultures tear you apart was offending my sensibilities." "Your sensibilities." Evelyn's laugh was sharp this time, edged with hysteria. "You're one of them. You're worse than them. Everyone in that room was terrified of you." "Yes." No denial, no deflection, just cold acknowledgement of a fact. Fear's honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. Unlike respect, which those people trade like currency while stabbing each other in the back. The car took a turn, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of where they were headed. Not back toward her uncle's modest townhouse in the merchant district. They were driving north toward the Blackwater Heights, where the oldest families lived behind iron gates and stone walls that had stood for centuries, where Dominic Wolfe's estate sat like a fortress overlooking the city. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, though she already knew. "Home. Your home, not mine. For now." He said it like it was settled, like her opinion on the matter was irrelevant. Evelyn felt anger cut through the fear and confusion, sharp and clarifying. "You can't just... I'm not some object you can collect. I have a life, You have nothing." The words were brutal in their honesty. "Your uncle's business is about to collapse. The Merchants Guild is severing contracts. In 3 months, you'll lose the house. In 6, you'll be working in a factory, or worse. Unless you accept reality and make a different choice." The casual way he said it, like her entire world imploding was just an unfortunate fact, like arithmetic, made Evelyn's vision blur with rage. "How do you know about my uncle's business?" "I know about everyone's business. It's my business to know." Dominic pulled a slim folder from the compartment beside him and tossed it onto the seat between them. Carter Shipping. Outstanding debts to 3 creditors, all due within the quarter. The Merchants Guild contract was the only thing keeping you afloat. Without it, bankruptcy is inevitable. Evelyn stared at the folder like it was a snake. She didn't need to open it to know he was telling the truth. The weight of her uncle's silences, the stress lines around his eyes, the way he'd insisted she keep attending these events even when the costs were crushing them, it all made horrible sense now. "You're a bastard," she said quietly. "Yes." No emotion in the word. Just agreement. "So what is this? Some kind of twisted charity? You collect broken things and put them on a shelf?" "No." Dominic's eyes locked onto hers, and there was something in them that made her breath catch. Not cruelty exactly, but something equally dangerous. "I collect weapons, and you, Miss Carter, have been sharpening yourself on their contempt for 2 years. You just didn't realize it yet." The car pulled through an iron gate that swung open silently. Beyond it, Evelyn saw the Wolf estate for the first time, and despite everything, despite the fear and anger and confusion, she felt her breath catch. It wasn't like the Ashford estate with its glittering excess and performative beauty. This was something else. Stone and iron and architecture that looked like it had been carved from the bones of the earth itself. 3 stories of dark granite, windows that gleamed like watchful eyes, gardens that were more wild than manicured. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress built to withstand sieges, which, Evelyn supposed, it probably had been. The car stopped in front of massive oak doors. A man in dark livery appeared to open Evelyn's door, but she was already pushing it open herself, climbing out into air that smelled of rain and stone and something indefinably different from the perfumed atmosphere of the world she'd just left. Dominic emerged from his side and moved toward the entrance with the easy confidence of someone who knew every stone, every shadow, every secret this place held. "Come," he said, not looking back. Evelyn stood there, the ring heavy on her finger, wine drying stiff on her dress. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of here while she still could. But where would she go? Back to her uncle's house to watch him slowly collapse under debt he'd taken on to give her a chance at this life? Back to face the whispers and the closed doors and the systematic erasure that would follow tonight's humiliation? Or forward into whatever fresh hell this man was offering? "Miss Carter?" Dominic had stopped at the door, finally turning to look at her. "I'm not going to force you. You can leave right now. I'll have my driver take you anywhere you want to go. But if you walk through this door, you're accepting my terms." "I don't even know what your terms are," Evelyn said, hating how small her voice sounded. "You will. Inside." It wasn't a choice. Not really. But at least it was hers to make. Evelyn walked through the door. The interior was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Dark wood, high ceilings, the kind of austere elegance that came from centuries of accumulated power rather than recently acquired wealth. But it wasn't cold. Fires burned in enormous hearths. Books lined the walls in a library visible through an archway. It felt lived in, used, real, in a way the Ashford estate, with all its polished perfection, never had. "This way." Dominic led her through corridors that seemed to go on forever, past rooms she caught only glimpses of, a study, a dining hall that could seat 40, a conservatory with glass walls that reflected the night sky. Finally, he stopped at a door and pushed it open. The room beyond was clearly meant for a woman, not decorated in the frilly, excessive style popular among the elite, but comfortable, elegant. A large bed with dark blue linens, a wardrobe, a writing desk by windows that overlooked the grounds, a private bathroom visible through another door. "This is yours," Dominic said, "for as long as you stay." Evelyn turned to face him, arms wrapped around herself. "And how long is that?" "That depends entirely on you." "Stop being cryptic and just tell me what you want." The words exploded out of her, all the fear and confusion and anger of the past hour finally breaking through. "You claim me in front of everyone. You bring me to your fortress. You give me a room. Why? What do you get out of this?" Dominic studied her for a moment, and something shifted in his expression. Not softening exactly, but recognition, like he was seeing something in her that satisfied some calculation he'd been running. You want the truth? He asked. I want to understand what the hell I just walked into. He moved further into the room, and Evelyn instinctively stepped back until her spine hit the wall. Dominic stopped, maintaining distance, but his presence filled the space anyway. I need a wife, he said flatly. Of all the things Evelyn had been expecting, that wasn't even on the list. What? Not for love. Not even for companionship, particularly. I need a wife for the same reason I need this house, my title, my reputation, because it's a tool in a game I'm playing. He said it like he was discussing business strategy, cold and analytical. The Beaumont family has been trying to force a marriage alliance for years. They have a daughter, simpering, calculated, exactly the kind of puppet who would be a liability. If I don't present an alternative soon, the pressure will become impossible to resist. Evelyn's mind reeled. So you decided to just pick someone? Anyone? Not anyone. You. Dominic's eyes locked onto hers. Because you're smart enough to survive in this world, desperate enough to accept the offer, and angry enough to actually be useful instead of decorative. Useful. The word tasted like ash. You mean controllable. I mean functional. He moved slightly, a subtle shift that made the space between them feel smaller without actually closing the distance. You think I want some delicate flower who will faint at the first sign of conflict? Someone who needs protection every second? I want someone who can stand on their own, who can think, who can be an asset instead of a burden. And in exchange for being your asset, I get what? A nice room? Pretty dresses? The privilege of playing house with a man who treats people like chess pieces? Something flashed in Dominic's eyes. Not anger, but something sharper. You get survival. Real survival. Not the slow death you were heading toward. You get protection from a world that was about to eat you alive. You get power. At what cost? The same cost you've been paying for 2 years. His voice dropped, took on an intensity that made her spine straighten. Except this time, when you bend, it's not for people who see you as nothing. It's for someone who sees exactly what you're worth. The words hung between them, heavy with implications Evelyn wasn't ready to examine. Her hand found the ring on her finger, twisted it nervously. This is insane, she said quietly. Yes. You're asking me to marry you, and I don't even know you. I'm not asking. Dominic's correction was gentle but firm. I'm offering. There's a difference. Is there? Evelyn met his eyes, searching for something, compassion, warmth, any sign of humanity beyond the calculating intelligence. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I'm trading one trap for another. For the first time, something that might have been respect flickered across Dominic's face. At least you're clear-eyed about it. That's more than most people manage. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. You have tonight to think about it. Tomorrow, I'll need an answer. If you agree, we'll discuss terms. If not, I'll have you taken home, and we'll both forget this happened. Will we? Evelyn's voice was raw. Will you forget? Will they? They saw me put my ring on your finger. They saw me claim you. If you leave now, they'll tear you apart even worse than before. You'll be the girl who caught a duke's attention for one night and lost it by morning. He said it without emotion, just stating facts. If you stay, you're untouchable. Your choice. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt like a cell door locking. Evelyn stood alone in the elegant room, surrounded by luxury that felt like a cage, wearing a ruined dress and a ring that weighed like an anchor. Through the windows, she could see the city spreading out below, thousands of lights, millions of people, all of them living lives that didn't involve bargaining away their futures to survive. She wanted to cry, to scream, to shatter something expensive and watch it break. Instead, she walked to the bathroom and ran water in the massive marble tub. The wine stain on her dress had dried to a rust color, permanent and damning. While the water ran, Evelyn caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, hair escaping its careful pins. Not the polished society girl who'd walked into the Ashford estate. Not the quiet, careful creature who'd spent 2 years smiling through contempt. Someone else. Someone raw and real and angry. The ring caught the light as she raised her hand to her face, gold and onyx, heavy with history and power. A brand or a promise or a weapon, She still didn't know which. Behind her, the tub filled with water, hot enough to hurt. Morning came too fast and too bright. Evelyn woke to the scent of coffee and something else. Fresh bread, maybe, or pastries. For a moment she forgot where she was, reaching for familiar surroundings that weren't there. Then memory crashed back like a wave. The ball, the wine, the ring, the car. Dominic Wolf's cold offer echoing in her mind. I need a wife. She sat up, finding herself in a nightgown she didn't remember putting on. The wine-stained dress was gone, replaced by clothing laid out on a chair, simple but expensive, sized perfectly for her. Which meant someone had come in while she was sleeping, had measured her somehow, had anticipated her needs without asking. The thought made her skin crawl. A knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Before Evelyn could respond, an older woman entered carrying a tray. She was dressed in staff uniform but moved with a confidence that suggested more than just a servant's role. Good morning, Miss Carter. I'm Mrs. Reeves, the head housekeeper. She set the tray on the desk. Coffee, fresh fruit, toast with butter and jam. His Grace requests your presence in his study at 10 o'clock. That gives you an hour to prepare. Did he also request that you take my clothes while I was unconscious? Evelyn's voice came out sharper than intended, but she didn't care. Mrs. Reeves didn't even blink. Your dress was ruined and unsuitable for wearing. We disposed of it. The clothing provided is yours to keep regardless of your decision this morning. How generous! The sarcasm dripped like acid. Quite. Mrs. Reeves moved toward the door, then paused. A word of advice, Miss Carter. You can resent his methods, but you'd be foolish to reject his offer. I've served this household for 30 years. I know what survival looks like in this world. What His Grace is offering you, protection, position, power, women have killed for less. She left before Evelyn could respond. The coffee was perfect. Evelyn hated that she noticed. The study was everything she'd expected. More books than most libraries, a desk that looked like it had witnessed centuries of decisions, windows overlooking grounds that stretched to the horizon. Dominic stood when she entered, which surprised her. Basic courtesy felt out of place coming from a man who'd essentially kidnapped her last night. Miss Carter, please sit. Evelyn remained standing. I'm not staying long enough to get comfortable. Have you made your decision, then? I have questions first. Dominic gestured to the chair again. When she still didn't move, he shrugged and sat himself, leaning back with that same dangerous relaxation from the night before. Ask. If I agree to this, and that's a massive if, what exactly does being your wife entail? Publicly, we present as a united front. You attend events with me, manage the household, represent the Wolf name in society. Privately, you have your own rooms, your own space, your own life as much as possible within the bounds of the arrangement. So a marriage in name only. Something flickered in his eyes, too quick to read. Initially. What does that mean? It means we're both adults, and I'm not making promises about the future neither of us can predict. His directness was brutal. But I won't touch you without your consent. That's not negotiable. Evelyn's hands clenched. How reassuring that you'll wait for permission before Don't. The word cut like a blade. Don't twist this into something uglier than it already is. I'm offering you a choice, not forcing you. If you want to walk out that door right now, you can. But be honest about what you're choosing and why. The accuracy of it stung. Evelyn forced herself to breathe, to think. What about my uncle, his business? The Merchants Guild contract will be restored within the week. His creditors will receive payments in full. The business stabilizes and he never needs to know why. He'll know something happened. He's not stupid. Let him think I was impressed by you at the ball. Let him think this is a love match that happened to come with financial benefits. The truth isn't his burden to carry. It was a lie built on lies, but Evelyn couldn't deny the mercy in it. Her uncle had sacrificed so much to give her opportunities. At least this way, he'd be freed from the debt that had been slowly killing him. And if I say no? Dominic pulled out a card and slid it across the desk. My driver will take you home. And this envelope is enough money to keep your uncle's business afloat for 3 months. After that, you're on your own. Evelyn stared at the envelope, understanding the calculation immediately. 3 months wasn't enough. It would just delay the inevitable, stretch out the suffering. It was a cushion to make her refusal easier to live with, not an actual solution. A trap disguised as generosity. "You're a calculating bastard," she said. "Yes." Still no emotion, just acknowledgement. "If I agree, what happens to the people who destroyed me last night? Constance Ashford, Lady Pemberton, all of them?" Now Dominic smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "You'll be a duchess, my duchess. That comes with power, real power, not the empty social games you've been playing. What you do with it is your choice." He leaned forward slightly. "You can forgive them if you're feeling charitable, or you can systematically dismantle everything they've built. I honestly don't care which, as long as you do it intelligently." The offer hung in the air between them, dark and tempting. Evelyn thought of Constance's smile as wine soaked into her dress, Lady Pemberton's casual cruelty, Victoria Blackwell's satisfied smirk as she detailed Evelyn's uncle's failing business. 2 years of swallowed insults. 2 years of smiling through contempt. 2 years of being less than nothing in their eyes. And now, the power to change everything. "I want terms," Evelyn heard herself say. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Interest, maybe, or satisfaction. "Name them." "My uncle never knows the real reason for this marriage. As far as he's concerned, we met, we connected. This is real." "Agreed." "I have access to my own funds, not an allowance you control, actual money that's mine. You'll receive a substantial sum upon marriage and quarterly payments after. The accounts will be in your name alone. I want the right to refuse public events if I have legitimate reason." Define legitimate. Illness, personal emergency, or if the event directly conflicts with my principles. Dominic considered this. Acceptable, within reason. But you don't get to hide from society entirely. That defeats the purpose. "I'm not interested in hiding." The words came out stronger than Evelyn expected. "I'm interested in not being your trained dog." A slight curve to his mouth, almost approval. "Anything else?" "If this arrangement ends, for any reason, I want a settlement that ensures I'm never dependent on anyone again. You'll be taken care of." His tone suggested this should be obvious. Not taken care of. Independent. Evelyn stepped closer to the desk, planting her hands on its surface. "I need to know that if this falls apart, I can survive without you. That I'm choosing to stay, not trapped into staying." For a long moment, Dominic studied her. Then he nodded slowly. "That's fair. Agreed." "Then I want it in writing, all of it. Legal documents that protect both of us." "My word isn't enough?" "Your word is worth exactly what mine was worth at the Ashford ball, which is to say, nothing without power to back it up." This time, Dominic's smile was genuine, sharp and dangerous and strangely warm. "You learn fast. Yes, we'll have it documented. Lawyers will draw up contracts. Everything legal and binding." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She was negotiating the terms of marrying a man she'd known for less than 12 hours. A man who collected people like weapons and made fear his primary tool. But what choice did she really have? "One more thing," she said quietly. "Yes?" "I need to know why. Really why." Evelyn met his eyes, searching for truth beneath the calculation. "You could have any woman in this city, women who'd actually want this marriage, who'd fit naturally into your world. Why me? Why now?" Dominic was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, moving to the window that overlooked his estate. "Because I'm tired," he said finally, his voice softer than she'd heard it. "Tired of games, tired of people who see me as nothing but power to exploit or fear to avoid. You stood in that ballroom being destroyed, and you didn't beg. You didn't cry. You didn't break." He turned to face her. "You just took it, and then you walked away with your spine straight. That's rare. That's valuable. That's someone I can work with instead of against." It wasn't love. It wasn't even affection. But it was honest in a way nothing else in her life had been for years. "When do you need my answer?" Evelyn asked. Now would be preferable. She thought of her uncle, crushed under debt, of the closed doors and turned backs waiting for her if she refused, of Constance Ashford's satisfied smile and Lady Pemberton's casual cruelty, of the ring still sitting heavy on her finger, of the power Dominic was offering, real power, not the scraps she'd been begging for. "Yes," Evelyn said. The word felt like stepping off a cliff. "I'll do it." Dominic's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. "Then we have an agreement." He extended his hand across the desk. Evelyn stared at it for a moment, this final gesture that would seal her fate, then reached out and shook it. His grip was firm, warm, absolute. "Welcome to the Wolf family, Miss Carter," he said. "Or should I start calling you Evelyn?" "Not yet." She pulled her hand back, already regretting everything and nothing. "Not until I'm sure I can trust you." "Fair enough." Dominic returned to his desk, pulling out papers that had clearly been prepared in advance. Of course they had. He'd known she'd say yes. The bastard had calculated every step. "The lawyers will finalize everything within a week. The wedding will be small, private, no spectacle." "Constance Ashford will be devastated to miss it," Evelyn said dryly. "Constance Ashford will receive an invitation to the reception. So will everyone who witnessed last night." His smile was predatory. "I want them to see what they threw away. I want them to watch you stand beside me and realize exactly how badly they miscalculated." It should have horrified her, this cold revenge he was planning. Instead, Evelyn felt something dark and satisfied curl in her chest. "When?" she asked. "The reception?" 3 weeks. That gives us time to make this convincing." Dominic pulled out a schedule, already filled with appointments. "You'll need new clothes, appropriate wardrobe for a duchess. Mrs. Reeves will coordinate. You'll also meet with my solicitor, my accountant, and my public relations advisor. They'll brief you on what being a wolf means." The reality of it crashed over her like a wave. This wasn't just a marriage. It was a transformation, a complete reconstruction of who she was and how she existed in the world. "I can't do this in 3 weeks," Evelyn said, panic creeping into her voice. "You can and you will." Dominic's certainty was absolute. "You've been performing for them for 2 years. Now you'll just be performing a different role, with better compensation." He said it like it was simple, like she wasn't about to step into a life that would consume everything she'd been and spit out something new and unrecognizable. "What if I fail?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "What if I can't be what you need?" For the first time, something that might have been gentleness crossed Dominic's face. "Then we'll adjust. This is a partnership, Evelyn. Unusual, yes. Built on necessity rather than emotion, but still a partnership. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be present." It was the first time he'd used her first name, and it landed differently than she'd expected. Less like possession and more like recognition. "Okay," Evelyn said, though nothing about this was okay. "What happens now?" "Now you get dressed. We're going out." "Where?" Dominic's smile returned, sharp and dangerous. "To show society exactly what they're dealing with, starting with a very public lunch at Marchand's." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Marchand's was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the place where power brokers made deals and society matrons held court. Walking in there with Dominic Wolfe would be like announcing their engagement with a megaphone. "You don't waste time, do you?" "Time wasted is power lost." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. From this moment forward, you're under my protection. That means if anyone tries to hurt you, humiliate you, or even look at you wrong, you tell me, immediately. I can fight my own battles. I know you can." His eyes locked onto hers. "But you don't have to anymore. That's the point." The door closed behind him, leaving Evelyn alone with racing thoughts and a decision that couldn't be undone. She looked down at the ring on her finger, no longer borrowed, no longer temporary. Hers now, for better or worse. Through the window, she could see the city spreading out below. Somewhere out there, Constance Ashford was probably having breakfast, secure in her victory. Lady Pemberton was likely planning her next social conquest. Victoria Blackwell was counting her family's wealth and feeling untouchable. They had no idea what was coming, and neither Evelyn realized with a thrill of terror and something darker, did she? But she was about to find out. The dress Mrs. Reeves selected was a declaration of war. Deep emerald silk that caught the light like liquid gemstones, cut to fit Evelyn's frame with surgical precision. Not the demure whites and pastels she'd worn to blend into society's wallpaper. This was a color that demanded attention, that said she wasn't hiding anymore. Evelyn stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. The girl who'd been humiliated at the Ashford ball was gone. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, wearing expensive armor and a duke's ring. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," Mrs. Reeves observed from the doorway. "Isn't that exactly what Marchand's will be?" "Probably." The older woman's smile was grim. "But you'll be standing next to the man who owns the rifles. That changes things." Did it? Evelyn touched the ring on her finger, still getting used to its weight. 24 hours ago, she'd been nobody. Now she was wearing a fortune in silk and about to walk into the lion's den on Dominic Wolfe's arm. The transformation felt too fast, too complete, like she'd skipped over all the steps between humiliation and power and landed somewhere she didn't know how to navigate. "He's waiting," Mrs. Reeves said gently. "Downstairs." Evelyn took one last look at herself, at the stranger in emerald silk, and headed down. Dominic stood in the entrance hall, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her uncle's yearly income. He looked up as she descended the stairs, and something flickered across his face. Not quite approval, but close. Recognition, maybe. Like he was seeing exactly what he'd calculated would be there. "You clean up well," he said. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It's an observation." He offered his arm. "Ready?" "No." "Good. Neither am I. That keeps us sharp." The car ride to Marchand's took 15 minutes, but every second felt stretched thin. Evelyn watched the city roll past, familiar streets suddenly looking different from behind tinted windows in a car that cost more than most houses. People on sidewalks glanced at the vehicle with curiosity and envy, having no idea who was inside, who she was becoming. "You're quiet," Dominic observed. "I'm thinking." "About?" "How quickly things change. Yesterday I was nothing. Today I'm—" She gestured at herself, at the dress, at him. "This, whatever this is. Power." His answer was immediate, certain. "That's what this is. And you're about to see how it works in practice." Marchand's occupied a corner building in the heart of the financial district, all glass and white marble, and exclusivity so thick you could choke on it. The kind of place where reservations were made months in advance and cancellations meant social death. Dominic's car pulled directly to the entrance. A valet appeared instantly, opening doors with the practiced efficiency of someone who recognized power when it arrived. Inside, the maitre d' materialized like a ghost. "Your Grace, welcome. Your table is ready." Of course it was. Dominic Wolfe didn't wait for tables. Tables waited for him. They walked through the restaurant, and Evelyn felt every eye in the room lock onto them. Conversation stuttered mid-sentence. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. The entire space seemed to hold its breath as Dominic Wolfe, who never attended public lunches, who was famously antisocial, walked past with a woman on his arm. A woman no one recognized. Until they got closer, and the whispers started. "Is that— It can't be— Carter's niece? The one from the Ashford ball? Wearing his ring?" The words rippled through the room like a shockwave. Evelyn kept her spine straight, her expression neutral, but her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to get away from all these watching eyes. But Dominic's hand was on the small of her back, steady and unmovable, guiding her forward. Their table was positioned perfectly, visible from every angle, impossible to ignore. Dominic held out her chair, waited for her to sit, then took his own seat directly across from her. The intimacy of the position wasn't lost on anyone watching. "Breathe," he said quietly, his voice pitched only for her. "I am breathing." "No, you're hyperventilating. There's a difference." He poured water from the crystal pitcher, handed her a glass. "Drink. Small sips. Look at me, not them." Evelyn forced herself to meet his eyes. dark, calculating, but not unkind in this moment. They're all staring. Good, let them. He leaned back slightly, utterly relaxed despite the attention. Half of them owe me money. The other half want something from me. None of them matter unless I decide they do. And I'm part of that calculation? Just another piece on your board? You're the queen piece, the most powerful one in the game. His slight smile was sharp. Act like it. Before Evelyn could respond, a familiar voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade through silk. Dominic, how unexpected. Constance Ashford stood beside their table, looking immaculate in pale pink, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. Two other women flanked her, Victoria Blackwell, and another socialite Evelyn recognized but couldn't name. The same trio who'd been part of the circle that had destroyed her. Looking at them now, with Dominic beside her and his ring on her finger, Evelyn felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Not fear. Rage. Constance. Dominic's acknowledgement was barely civil. Victoria. Charlotte. We heard the most fascinating rumor this morning, Constance continued, her eyes sliding to Evelyn like a snake examining prey. About you and, well, I simply couldn't believe it. Believe what you want. Dominic's tone suggested complete disinterest. Is it true, then? Victoria leaned in, her curiosity barely masked by false concern. Are you actually engaged? Yes. Dominic reached across the table and took Evelyn's hand, his thumb brushing over the ring in a gesture that looked almost tender. Formally announced next week, but I see no reason to hide it. The silence that followed was deafening. Constance's smile froze on her face, her eyes darting between Dominic and Evelyn like she was trying to solve an impossible equation. Victoria's expression cracked completely, shocked naked on her features. Charlotte, whoever she was, looked like she might faint. But, Constance started, then seemed to recalibrate. How wonderful. So sudden, though. You only just met at my party. Actually, Dominic said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. We've known each other for quite some time. Your party simply provided the right moment to make our arrangement public. It was a lie. Smooth and perfect, and completely believable. More than that, it reframed the entire narrative. Not a duke rescuing a humiliated nobody, but a relationship that had existed in secret, revealed at the exact moment these women had tried to destroy her. It made them look not just cruel, but stupid. I see. Constance's fingers tightened on her clutch until her knuckles went white. Well, congratulations are in order, I suppose. Suppose? Evelyn heard herself speak for the first time, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. You don't sound certain. Constance's eyes snapped to her, and for a second, pure hatred flashed across her face before the social mask slammed back into place. Of course I'm certain. It's just surprising, given your background. There it was, the knife sliding between ribs with practiced precision. Evelyn felt Dominic's hand tighten on hers, a warning or support, she couldn't tell which. But the rage that had been building since the wine stain, since the laughter, since 2 years of swallowing contempt, finally found its voice. My background, Evelyn said softly, includes knowing the difference between genuine class and people who buy their breeding certificates from old names and empty coffers. The words landed like grenades. Victoria actually gasped. Charlotte took a half step backward. Even Constance seemed momentarily speechless. Evelyn, Dominic said, but there was something in his voice that wasn't quite a reprimand. Satisfaction, maybe, or approval. Apologize if I've offended, Evelyn continued, her smile matching Constance's for sharpness. But then, I learned from watching the best. You've all been so generous with your lessons on how to treat people you consider beneath you. How dare you? Victoria started, but Constance held up a hand. It's fine. Her voice could have frozen nitrogen. Clearly, Miss Carter has learned to bite now that she has protection. How quaint. Duchess Carter, actually. Dominic's correction was casual, but it hit like a hammer. The title transfer will be official next week, but the forms are already filed, so perhaps adjust your forms of address accordingly. The impact was immediate. Constance went pale. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. Around them, the restaurant had gone completely silent, every conversation abandoned in favor of watching this confrontation play out. Duchess. Not just a wife, but an equal partner in one of the oldest, most powerful titles in the realm, Evelyn Carter. Nobody, merchant class, barely tolerated, was about to become a duchess. While Constance Ashford, for all her family name and old money, would never rise above lady, the hierarchy had just inverted, and everyone in the room knew it. "I think," Dominic said into the ringing silence, "you ladies should return to your table. Your lunch is getting cold." It was a dismissal, absolute and final. Constance's face went through several colors before settling on a sickly white. "Of course. Enjoy your meal. Your Grace." The words tasted like poison in her mouth, but she said them because she had to. Because Dominic Wolfe had just rewritten all the rules, and refusing to acknowledge it would only make her look weaker. The three women retreated, their exit lacking any of the confidence they'd arrived with. Evelyn watched them go, her heart hammering, her hands shaking under the table where no one could see. "Well," Dominic said calmly, picking up his menu like nothing had happened. "That was educational." "Educational?" Evelyn's voice came out strangled. "I just declared war on half of society." "You declared honesty. There's a difference." He glanced up at her, something almost warm in his eyes. "And you did it perfectly. Enough bite to draw blood, but wrapped in just enough civility that they can't officially complain. They'll destroy me for this. They'll try." He set down the menu. "Let them. You have something they don't." "What's that?" "Me. Simple, certain, absolute. And I don't lose." The waiter arrived then, interrupting whatever response Evelyn might have made. They ordered, or rather, Dominic ordered for both of them with the casual authority of someone who knew exactly what he wanted and expected to receive it. As the waiter left, Evelyn became aware of the continued attention from the rest of the restaurant. People trying to look like they weren't staring while absolutely staring. Phones discreetly raised to snap photos. Whispered conversations spreading the news like wildfire. By tonight, everyone would know. By tomorrow, the engagement would be in every society column. By next week, there would be no going back. "I can hear you panicking from here," Dominic observed. "I'm not panicking. I'm processing." "Process faster. We have a reception to plan and a wedding to execute. No time for second thoughts." "You say that like it's simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple." He leaned forward slightly. "You wanted power. This is what it looks like. Uncomfortable, dangerous, and absolutely necessary if you want to survive." Before Evelyn could respond, a man approached their table. Older, distinguished, with the kind of face that suggested he'd witnessed history being made and probably influenced some of it. He stopped at a respectful distance, waiting for acknowledgement. Dominic's expression shifted, became more guarded. "Senator Blackwell, Victoria's father, of course." "Your Grace." The senator's smile was politician perfect, warm and empty. "I couldn't help but overhear the wonderful news. Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you." Dominic's tone suggested he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I was hoping we might discuss the railway contract at your convenience, of course." There it was. The real reason for the approach. Not congratulations, but opportunity. A chance to leverage this new situation for business advantage. "My office will contact yours," Dominic said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. But Senator Blackwell wasn't finished. His eyes slid to Evelyn, assessment naked in his gaze. "And Miss Carter, or should I say, soon-to-be Duchess Carter. Welcome to the family, so to speak. Your uncle must be thrilled." The mention of her uncle felt deliberate, a reminder of where she'd come from, what she'd been before Dominic's intervention, a subtle power play wrapped in courtesy. "He will be," Evelyn said carefully, "when we tell him." "Ah, still a secret in some quarters then." The senator's smile widened. "How intriguing." Something in his tone set off alarms in Evelyn's mind. This wasn't casual conversation. This was reconnaissance, information gathering. "Is there something specific you wanted to ask, Senator?" Dominic's voice had gone cold. Or are you simply making social calls during lunch service? Just offering my congratulations and perhaps a word of friendly advice. He looked at Evelyn again. The transition from one world to another can be challenging. If you need guidance navigating society's expectations, my wife would be happy to assist. It sounded helpful. It was a threat. Victoria's mother helping Evelyn navigate society would mean putting her under the Blackwell family's influence. It would mean obligation, debt, control. Everything Dominic had just freed her from. How kind, Evelyn said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. But I'm confident I can manage. After all, I've been watching how these things are done for quite some time. I've had excellent teachers. The barb landed. Senator Blackwell's smile tightened fractionally before he recovered. Of course. Well, the offer stands if you change your mind. He departed, but Evelyn could feel his attention like weight on her shoulders, even after he'd returned to his table. He's going to be a problem, she said quietly. He's always been a problem. Dominic watched the senator with hooded eyes. But now he's your problem too. Welcome to the game. Their food arrived, some kind of fish that probably had a French name and cost more than a week's groceries. Evelyn picked at it, her appetite gone. Around them, the restaurant had resumed normal noise levels, but the attention never fully disappeared. Every few minutes, someone would glance their way. Phones continued their discreet photo sessions. The news was spreading in real time. You're not eating, Dominic observed. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. You'll need your strength for what comes next. What comes next? Tonight, we attend the Pemberton Foundation Gala. Evelyn's fork clattered against her plate. You can't be serious. Completely serious. Lady Pemberton's annual charity gala. Half of society will be there. It's the perfect opportunity to make our engagement official. It's also the perfect opportunity for them to tear me apart. Again. Let them try. Dominic's certainty was infuriating. You're not the same woman they destroyed at the Ashford ball. You're someone new, someone they have to respect whether they want to or not. Respect built on fear isn't real respect. No, but it's a hell of a lot more reliable. He finished his wine, set the glass down with finality. You wanted this, Evelyn. Power. Protection. A chance to stand up to people who've been crushing you for years. Well, this is what it looks like. Uncomfortable dinners and strategic appearances and using fear as a tool. If you can't handle it, tell me now. The challenge hung between them, sharp and clear. Last chance to back out. Last chance to return to being nobody. Evelyn thought of Constance's face when Dominic had corrected her title. Victoria's shock. Senator Blackwell's calculating assessment. All of them realizing too late that the girl they'd dismissed was now someone they couldn't ignore. I can handle it, she said. Good. Dominic signaled for the check. Because there's something else you need to know. What? The Beaumont family, the ones trying to force a marriage alliance I mentioned? He pulled out his phone, swiped to a photo, turned it to face her. This is Eleanor Beaumont, and she's going to be at the gala tonight. The woman in the photo was stunning, blonde, elegant, with the kind of classical beauty that graced magazine covers. She looked exactly like the type of woman who should marry a duke. Everything Evelyn wasn't. Let me guess, Evelyn said, her stomach sinking. She's not going to take our engagement well. She's going to contest it, publicly. Her family has been positioning her as the future Duchess Wolfe for 3 years. This blindsides their entire strategy. So tonight isn't just about showing society our engagement. It's about surviving whatever the Beaumonts throw at us. Now you're thinking strategically. Dominic pocketed his phone. Eleanor is dangerous because she's smart, and she has her entire family backing her. They won't accept this quietly. They'll attack. Subtly at first, then more directly if they think they can get away with it. And what am I supposed to do about it? Stand your ground, don't give them ammunition, and remember that you're not fighting alone. His eyes locked onto hers. I chose you, Evelyn. That means something in this world. It means I see value they're too blind to recognize. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like more weight added to shoulders already struggling to bear the load. They left Marchand's under the same scrutiny they'd entered with. Evelyn kept her head high, her hand on Dominic's arm, playing the role of confident duchess-to-be even as terror churned in her gut. The car ride back to the estate was quiet. Evelyn stared out the window, watching the city transform as they moved from the wealthy commercial district to the even wealthier residential areas. Each mile taking her further from the life she'd known and deeper into one she was still learning to navigate. "You did well," Dominic said eventually. "I insulted half the room." "Exactly. Shows you have a spine." He almost smiled. "They respect strength here, Evelyn, even when they hate you for it, especially when they hate you for it." Back at the estate, Mrs. Reeves was waiting with another dress, this one midnight blue, formal enough for a gala, cut to make a statement. Evelyn stared at it with the resignation of a soldier looking at battle armor. 6 hours until the gala," Mrs. Reeves announced. "That gives us time for hair, makeup, and a briefing on who's who." "A briefing? You need to know the key players, who to approach, who to avoid, who's allied with whom." The older woman's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Tonight isn't just a party, it's a battlefield, and you need to know the terrain." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Reeves ran through a dossier of society's major players with the efficiency of a general planning a campaign. Names, faces, connections, feuds, alliances, all of it cataloged and prioritized. By the time the stylist finished with her hair and makeup, Evelyn felt like her head might explode from information overload. "One more thing," Mrs. Reeves said as Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in her midnight blue gown. She produced a jewelry box, opened it to reveal a necklace that made Evelyn's breath catch. Sapphires and diamonds in a design that looked centuries old, the kind of piece that belonged in a museum, not around someone's neck. "The Wolf sapphires," Mrs. Reeves explained, "worn by every Duchess Wolf for 300 years. His Grace wants you to wear them tonight." "I can't. That's too much. It's a statement that you're not temporary, that this is real." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "And between you and me, it's also armor. Let them see you wearing history they can never claim." Evelyn let Mrs. Reeves fasten the necklace, felt the weight of 3 centuries of power settle against her collarbone. In the mirror, she looked like someone else entirely, someone who belonged in this world of old money and older power. The illusion was almost perfect. Almost. Dominic was waiting at the bottom of the stairs again, this time in formal evening wear that made him look like he'd stepped out of a different century. His eyes traveled over her, the dress, the jewelry, the careful styling, and something flickered across his face. "Perfect," he said simply. "I feel like a fraud." "Good. That means you're paying attention." He offered his arm. "Ready to face the wolves? Shouldn't that be your family motto or something?" This time he actually laughed. "It is, actually. De lupo non timeo. I do not fear the wolf." "What if you are the wolf? Then everyone else should be afraid." The Pemberton Foundation Gala was held at the Whitmore Estate, another fortress of old money disguised as architectural beauty. As their car pulled up, Evelyn could see the crowd already gathering, designer gowns and tailored suits, jewels catching light from crystal chandeliers visible through massive windows. This was it. The moment she stepped out of this car, everything changed permanently. "Evelyn," Dominic's voice pulled her from spiraling thoughts. "Look at me." She met his eyes. "You survived the Ashford ball. You survived lunch at Marchand's. You'll survive this." His certainty was absolute. "And anyone who tries to hurt you will regret it. I promise you that." It should have been terrifying, the cold menace in his voice. Instead, it felt like safety. They exited the car to camera flashes, actual press photographers, not just society gossips with phones. The engagement was real news now, big enough to warrant coverage. "Duke Wolf, Miss Carter, over here!" "Is it true about the engagement?" "When's the wedding?" "Miss Carter, how do you respond to rumors about—" Dominic cut through the noise with practiced ease, his hand firm on Evelyn's back as he guided her through the gauntlet. They entered the estate to a receiving line where Lady Pemberton stood with her husband, greeting guests with the smile of a woman who controlled access to power. That smile froze when she saw who was approaching. "Your Grace," she managed, her voice brittle. "Miss Carter, how unexpected." "Lady Pemberton," Dominic's greeting was cool. "Thank you for the invitation. I don't recall—" She stopped herself, recalculated. Of course she hadn't sent an invitation. Dominic Wolfe didn't need invitations. He went where he wanted. Lovely event, Evelyn said, her voice sugar-sweet. So generous of you to support such worthy causes. Though I have to ask, does the foundation donate as much as it spends on galas? I'd love to see the numbers. It was a direct shot. Charity foundations were notorious for spending more on events than actual charitable work. Asking about the numbers in public was essentially calling out their integrity. Lady Pemberton's face went through several interesting colors. We publish our financial reports annually. How transparent. I look forward to reviewing them. Evelyn smiled, channeling every ounce of false sweetness she'd learned from watching these women operate. Accountability is so important in philanthropy, don't you think? They moved past before Lady Pemberton could respond, leaving her sputtering in their wake. You're getting better at this, Dominic murmured. I'm learning from the best manipulators money can buy. The ballroom was magnificent, all gold and crystal and carefully curated beauty designed to impress. Hundreds of people milled about, champagne flowing freely, conversations humming with the peculiar intensity of people who traded in influence and secrets. Every single one of them turned to stare when Evelyn and Dominic entered. The whispers started immediately, rolling through the crowd like thunder before a storm. Evelyn felt Dominic's hand tighten fractionally on her waist. Not possessive, but grounding. A reminder that she wasn't alone. They made it perhaps 10 steps into the room before Eleanor Beaumont materialized in front of them. She was even more striking in person than in photos. Tall, blonde, wearing white silk that made her look like some kind of avenging angel. Her smile was perfection itself, and absolutely venomous. Dominic, she said, her voice warm as summer honey, I've been trying to reach you for days. Imagine my surprise when I heard the news from others instead of from you directly. Eleanor. Dominic's tone was carefully neutral. Allow me to introduce, oh, I know who she is. Eleanor's eyes slid to Evelyn, and the contempt there was naked. The merchant's niece, who's been playing dress-up in society. How charming. The casual cruelty was breathtaking. Around them, conversations had stopped completely. Everyone within earshot was watching, waiting to see how this played out. And you're the woman, Evelyn said carefully. Who's been trying to buy her way into a title for 3 years? Tell me, does your family have a bulk discount rate with the matchmakers, or do they pay per failed attempt? The room went silent. Eleanor's perfect smile cracked. How dare you? I dare, Evelyn interrupted, because apparently that's what we do here. Trade insults wrapped in pleasantries and pretend we're being civil. Though I have to say, your version lacks subtlety. Subtlety? Eleanor's laugh was sharp. Coming from someone who's only here because she caught a duke's attention for 5 minutes? Please, we both know this is temporary. A momentary lapse in judgment that will be corrected once he remembers who actually belongs in his world. That's enough. Dominic's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Not loud, but carrying an authority that made people step back instinctively. Eleanor turned to him, and for the first time, Evelyn saw something like desperation flash across her face. Dominic, please, whatever this is, whatever you're trying to prove, we can fix it. My family is willing to overlook this indiscretion. We can announce our engagement tomorrow, explain this away as a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Dominic's hand moved from Evelyn's waist to her hand, lifting it so the ring caught the light. Miss Carter and I are engaged. The announcement will be made officially next week. This conversation is pointless. No. Eleanor's voice rose, losing its cultivated smoothness. No, I won't accept this. You can't just... She's nobody. She has no name, no breeding, no... She has me. 3 words spoken with absolute finality. That's all that matters. The impact was immediate. Eleanor's face went white, then red, cycling through emotions too fast to track. Around them, the crowd murmured. Not just gossip now, but shock. Dominic Wolfe, famously cold, famously calculating, had just made a public declaration that bordered on romantic. It was all performance. Evelyn knew that. But it was devastating effective. Eleanor looked between them, seeming to realize she'd lost before the fight had even truly begun. Then her expression hardened into something ugly. Fine, she said, her voice dropping to something dangerous. If you want to ruin yourself with damaged goods, that's your choice. But don't think this is over. You'll regret this, both of you. My family doesn't accept defeat gracefully." She swept past them, her exit less dignified than she probably intended. Evelyn watched her go, adrenaline making her hands shake. "Well," Dominic said quietly, "that could have gone better." "Better? She just declared war." "She declared war the moment we announced our engagement. This was just making it official." He guided her toward the edge of the room, away from the worst of the staring crowd. "You handled it well, though." "I insulted her family's entire strategy." "Exactly. Shows you're not intimidated." He snagged 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter, handed her one. "Drink. You've earned it." Evelyn downed half the glass in one go, then immediately regretted it as bubbles burned her throat. Around them, the party slowly resumed normal volume, though she could still feel eyes tracking their every move. "This is insane," she muttered. "This is power." Dominic's gaze swept the room, cataloging threats and allies with practiced ease. "Every person here is recalculating their relationship to you right now, figuring out how to use you or avoid you or align with you. It's exhausting, yes, but it's also how this world works." Before Evelyn could respond, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Her Uncle Marcus, looking uncomfortable in formal wear he probably couldn't afford, talking with a group of merchants she recognized from the guild. "My uncle's here," she said, her stomach dropping. Dominic followed her gaze. "Ah, that complicates things. I have to tell him, before he hears it from someone else." Evelyn set down her champagne glass. Decision made. "I can't let him find out his niece is engaged to a duke through the gossip mill." "Are you sure? It might be easier shot." "Nothing about this is easy." She met Dominic's eyes. "But he deserves to hear it from me." For a moment, Dominic looked like he might argue. Then he nodded. "Go. I'll handle the vultures here." Evelyn crossed the ballroom toward her uncle, feeling the weight of every stare. Marcus Carter looked up as she approached, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile that made guilt twist in her chest. "Evelyn, I didn't know you'd be here. Thought this crowd was a bit above our—" He stopped, really looking at her for the first time. The dress, the jewelry, the transformation. "What's going on?" "Uncle Marcus." Evelyn took his arm, steering him toward a quieter corner. "We need to talk." That sounds ominous, but he followed, concern creasing his features. "Are you all right? I heard something happened at the Ashford ball, but you didn't—" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually, but there's something I need to tell you." She took a breath, trying to find words for a situation that had no good explanation. "I'm engaged." Marcus blinked. "What?" "To Duke Wolf, Dominic Wolf. The engagement will be announced next week, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You're joking." "I'm not." "But you barely know him. When did you even meet? How—" He stopped, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The Ashford ball. Something did happen." "Yes." Evelyn kept her voice steady, hating the lie she was about to tell. "We've been seeing each other for a few months." Keeping it quiet because of his position. "But after the ball, we decided there was no point hiding anymore." It was the story Dominic had established at Marchand's, and it held together as long as no one looked too closely. Marcus searched her face, and Evelyn had the horrible feeling he could see right through her. "Does he treat you well?" Marcus asked finally, his voice rough. "Yes." That at least wasn't a lie. Dominic was cold, calculating, using her as a chess piece, but he'd been honest about it. More honest than anyone else in this world. "And you love him?" The question landed like a punch. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it. Love had never been part of this equation. This was survival, strategy, a transaction between two people who needed each other. But she couldn't say that to her uncle. "I care about him," she said carefully. "And he cares about me. That's enough." Marcus didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly. "If you're sure this is what you want, it is." The certainty in her voice surprised even her. "Then I'm happy for you." He pulled her into a hug, and Evelyn felt something crack in her chest. This man had sacrificed so much to give her opportunities. had worked himself sick trying to maintain business contracts that would keep her in society's orbit. And now she was lying to him to protect a charade built on necessity rather than love. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "For everything." When they pulled apart, Marcus was smiling despite the concern still lingering in his eyes. "A duchess. My niece, a duchess. Your parents would be so proud." The mention of her dead parents, casualties of a factory fire when she was 16, nearly broke her composure. They'd died trying to build a better life for her. Would they be proud of this or horrified? "I should get back," Evelyn said, needing to escape before emotion overwhelmed her. "Dominic will be wondering." "Of course. Go." Marcus squeezed her hand. "But Evelyn, if you ever need anything, if this gets too complicated or you change your mind—" "I know. Thank you." She made it halfway back to Dominic before Senator Blackwell intercepted her, his politician smile firmly in place. "Duchess Carter," he said, using her future title with practiced ease. "A moment?" Evelyn wanted to refuse, but people were watching. "Of course." "I wanted to apologize for my daughter's behavior at Marchand's. Victoria can be intense." His smile never wavered. "I hope there are no hard feelings." "None at all," Evelyn lied smoothly. "Excellent. Because I have a proposition for you." He lowered his voice, leaning in conspiratorially. "My railway contract with Duke Wolfe is worth millions. Having you as an ally could be mutually beneficial." There it was, not an apology, recruitment. He wanted to use her position to influence Dominic's business decisions. "I'm not sure I understand," Evelyn said carefully. "Don't you?" His eyes hardened beneath the smile. "You're about to have significant influence over one of the most powerful men in the realm. That influence could be directed toward favorable outcomes for those willing to compensate you appropriately." He was asking her to spy on Dominic, to sell information about his business decisions, to betray the man who'd just saved her from destruction. "Senator Blackwell," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to match his, "I appreciate the creative thinking, but I'm not interested in your proposition." "Think about it." His hand closed on her arm, grip just shy of painful. "A girl from your background could use additional income streams, and it would be a shame if certain information about your uncle's business practices came to light during the upcoming guild audit." The threat was naked now, all pretense of courtesy abandoned. He was trying to blackmail her into working for him. Evelyn felt rage crystallize into something cold and hard. "Remove your hand, now!" "Or what?" The senator's smile turned cruel. "You'll run to your duke, tell him the big bad politician scared you? That's not how this world works, girl. You want to play with power, you need to understand." "She understands perfectly." Dominic's voice cut through the threat like ice water. The senator released Evelyn's arm immediately, stepping back as Dominic appeared at her side. "Your Grace, I was just threatening my fiancée." Dominic's tone could have frozen fire. "Using blackmail to attempt recruitment into what I can only assume is industrial espionage." Around them, people had started to notice the confrontation. Phones appeared, discreet but present. Whatever happened next would be documented. "That's a serious accusation," the senator said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "It's a statement of fact. I heard every word." Dominic's smile was terrifying. "And I have witnesses. Would you like to continue this conversation, or shall we skip ahead to the part where you apologize and leave before I destroy everything you've built?" The senator's face went through several colors. He was trapped. Deny it and look weak, admit it, and confirm Dominic's accusation. Either way, he'd lost. "My apologies," he said finally, the words clearly choking him. "I misspoke. Miss Carter, I meant no— Get out." Dominic's voice was quiet but absolute. "You're no longer welcome here, or at any event I attend. Speak to my lawyers if you have issues with that decision." Senator Blackwell left, his exit watched by hundreds of eyes and captured by dozens of phones. By morning, the story would be everywhere. Powerful politician attempts to blackmail Duke's fiancée, gets destroyed publicly. Evelyn stood frozen, adrenaline making her vision sharp and strange. Did that really just happen? Yes. Dominic's hand found the small of her back again, steady and grounding. Are you all right? I. Yes. No, I don't know. She looked up at him. He threatened my uncle, tried to force me to spy on you. I know, I heard. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. And now he'll pay for it. The railway contract is gone. His political allies will receive very specific information about certain questionable investments. By next month, Senator Blackwell will be too busy defending himself to threaten anyone. The casual way he planned destruction should have terrified her. Instead, Evelyn felt something like satisfaction. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me. This is what I promised. Protection. Real protection, not empty words. He guided her toward the exit. We're leaving. You've had enough for one night. The car ride back was silent. Evelyn stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, her mind replaying the evening in fractured images. Eleanor's hatred, the senator's threat, her uncle's hopeful smile built on lies. This world was more dangerous than she'd imagined. Not just socially dangerous, actually dangerous, with people who'd blackmail and threaten and destroy without hesitation. And she was marrying into the heart of it. Evelyn, Dominic's voice pulled her back. They'd arrived at the estate without her noticing. You're thinking too hard. Someone just tried to blackmail me into betraying you. Yes. And you refused. That's what matters. What if I hadn't? What if I'd been tempted? Were you? His eyes locked onto hers, searching. Evelyn thought about it honestly. Had she been tempted? For even a second, had she considered the senator's offer? No, she said finally. I wasn't. Then stop torturing yourself. He climbed out of the car, came around to open her door. You passed tonight's test. Multiple tests, actually. You survived Eleanor's attack, rejected blackmail, told your uncle, and didn't break. That's more than most people manage in a lifetime. It was one night. It was the hardest night. The first public appearance as my fiancé. Everything else will be easier. Evelyn wanted to believe him. But as she walked into the estate, past servants who now saw her differently, toward a room that felt less like a guest suite and more like a gilded cage, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that the real test was still coming. She was right. The attack came 3 days later at the formal engagement announcement, a private event, carefully curated guest list, meant to establish their union before the larger society wedding. Everything was perfect, the ballroom decorated in silver and white, champagne flowing, influential guests congratulating them with varying degrees of sincerity. Evelyn wore another fortune in diamonds and tried not to think about what each smile cost in terms of future obligation. She was standing with Dominic, accepting congratulations from a banking family, when the doors burst open. Eleanor Beaumont swept in, flanked by her father and 2 men Evelyn didn't recognize, all of them wearing expressions that promised violence. This engagement, Lord Beaumont announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, is invalid, built on fraud and deception. And I have proof. He threw a folder on the nearest table, photographs spilling out. Evelyn's breath caught as she saw what they contained. Her uncle, meeting with Dominic's business associates, exchanging documents, money, clearly making deals. Your fiancé's family, Lord Beaumont continued, has been illegally trading on insider information from your company for months, using you, Your Grace. And she knew about it the entire time. The room erupted. Accusations flew. Evelyn stood frozen, mind reeling. Her uncle wouldn't, he couldn't. But the photos didn't lie. Dominic's hand found hers, squeezed once. Then he released her and stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury. Not at the Beaumonts, at the Beauchamp, at her. Is this true? His voice was ice. Did you know? And Evelyn realized with horrible clarity that this was the real test. The moment everything balanced on a knife's edge. She could lie, deny everything, claim ignorance, fight to save this engagement and all the power it represented. Or she could tell the truth, whatever it was, and face the consequences. The room watched, waiting for her answer, and Evelyn honestly didn't know what to say. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Evelyn stared at the photographs scattered across the table, her uncle's face clearly visible in each one, meeting with men she didn't recognize, exchanging what looked like documents and money. The evidence of betrayal laid out like a prosecution exhibit. Dominic stood 3 feet away, his expression carved from ice, waiting for her answer. Around them, 200 guests held their collective breath, phones already raised to capture whatever came next. "Did you know?" he asked again, his voice carrying across the room with surgical precision. Evelyn's mind raced. She could see the calculation in Lord Beaumont's eyes, the satisfaction in Eleanor's smile. This was their play. Destroy her credibility, make Dominic look like a fool for trusting her, invalidate the engagement before it could be formalized. And it would work, unless she gave them the one answer they weren't expecting: the truth. "No," Evelyn said clearly. "I didn't know, but I also don't believe it." Lord Beaumont's smile widened. "The photographs mean nothing without context." She stepped toward the table, ignoring the way people instinctively moved back. "When were these taken? Where? Who are these men? You've presented images with no documentation, no timestamps, no verification. For all I know, you staged them yesterday." "How dare you suggest," Eleanor started, but Evelyn cut her off. "I dare, because I know my uncle. Marcus Carter has spent 30 years building his business on honest contracts and fair dealing. He's not stupid enough to commit fraud that obvious, and he sure as hell wouldn't be sloppy enough to get photographed doing it." She picked up one of the images, examined it with a critical eye. "These are surveillance photos, professional quality, which means someone's been following him for weeks, waiting for anything that could be twisted into looking suspicious." "You're grasping at straws," Lord Beaumont said, but something in his voice had shifted. Uncertainty, maybe, or surprise that she was fighting back instead of collapsing. "Am I?" Evelyn turned to face Dominic, and this part was the gamble. The moment where everything either held together or shattered completely. "Your Grace, do you conduct all your business meetings in private offices?" Dominic's expression didn't change, but she saw his eyes sharpen. "No." "Do you sometimes meet with potential partners in public places? Restaurants, clubs, even on the street?" "Yes." He was following her logic now. She could see it. "And when you exchange business cards, contracts for review, or initial consultation fees, does that constitute illegal insider trading?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. Not quite a smile, but close. "It does not." Evelyn turned back to the Beaumonts. "My uncle runs a shipping company. He meets with dozens of potential clients every week. These photographs show him doing exactly that, conducting normal business in public spaces. The fact that some of those clients might have connections to the Wolf estate doesn't prove conspiracy. It proves my uncle is good at his job." "That's a convenient interpretation," Eleanor said, her voice sharp. "It's the obvious interpretation. Unless you have actual evidence, financial records showing illegal transactions, communications proving conspiracy, anything beyond photographs of normal business meetings, then this is exactly what it looks like. A desperate attempt to destroy my credibility using manufactured scandal." The room's energy had shifted. People were looking at the photographs with new eyes, seeing what Evelyn had pointed out. Nothing obviously criminal, just meetings that could be twisted to look suspicious without context. "You're lying," Lord Beaumont said, but the certainty had bled from his voice. "Your family has been trading on—" "Prove it." Evelyn's voice cut like a blade. "Right now. Show everyone here the financial records that prove illegal trading. Show the communications. Show anything beyond these ambiguous photographs." Silence. Lord Beaumont's face darkened. "I don't have to prove anything to you. The evidence speaks for itself." "No," Dominic said quietly, and every eye in the room swung to him. "It doesn't. What you've presented is circumstantial at best, manufactured at worst. And frankly, I'm insulted that you think I'd fall for something this transparent." Eleanor took a step forward. "Dominic, please, she's manipulating you. Can't you see—" "What I see," he interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "is a family so desperate to force an alliance that they'd resort to fabricating evidence and public accusations. What I see is a woman I've known for 3 hours showing more integrity than people I've dealt with for years." He moved to stand beside Evelyn, a united front. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. This engagement stands, Dominic continued. The wedding proceeds as planned. And if you attempt another stunt like this, Lord Beaumont, I will personally ensure that every business dealing your family has ever conducted receives the same level of scrutiny you've tried to apply to Miss Carter's uncle. The threat hung in the air, heavy and final. Lord Beaumont's face cycled through several shades of red. You're making a mistake. When the truth comes out, then we'll deal with it, together. Dominic's hand found Evelyn's, squeezed once. Not for show, genuine support. Now I believe you were asked to leave. Security will be happy to assist if you need help finding the exit. Two men in dark suits appeared from the edges of the room, not aggressive but present. The message was clear. Eleanor looked between Evelyn and Dominic, something like desperation flashing across her perfect features. You'll regret this, both of you. Possibly, Dominic said, but not as much as you'll regret this performance. Goodbye, Eleanor. The Beaumonts left under escort, their exit watched by hundreds of witnesses and documented by dozens of phones. The moment the doors closed behind them, the room erupted in conversation. Evelyn stood frozen, adrenaline making her hands shake. She'd just gambled everything on her uncle's integrity and her own ability to think on her feet. If those photographs turned out to be real evidence of actual fraud— Breathe, Dominic said quietly, still holding her hand. You did well. I might have just lied to 200 people. Did you? Do you actually believe your uncle is guilty? Evelyn thought about Marcus Carter, the man who'd taken her in after her parents died, who'd worked himself sick to give her opportunities, who'd never once asked for anything in return. No, I don't. Then you told the truth. Everything else is just noise. He turned to address the room, raising his voice to cut through the chatter. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. Please, continue enjoying the evening. The engagement stands, and I hope you'll join us in celebrating. It was a command dressed as an invitation. The party resumed, though the energy had changed. People approached cautiously now, offering congratulations that felt more like assessment, trying to figure out if they'd just witnessed a brilliant defense or a spectacular con. Evelyn smiled and accepted their well wishes, playing the role of confident duchess-to-be, even as her mind spun with implications. The Beaumonts would investigate further. If there was any truth to those accusations, they'd find it. And if her uncle really was involved in something illegal, she pushed the thought away. Not here, not now. The party lasted another 2 hours, each minute feeling like an eternity. By the time the last guest departed, Evelyn's face hurt from forced smiling, and her feet ached from standing in heels designed more for appearance than comfort. Dominic dismissed the staff with a gesture, waiting until they were alone before speaking. We need to talk. Those 4 words sent ice through Evelyn's veins. About? Your uncle. Whether you believe it or not, we need to verify those accusations weren't based on anything real. He moved toward his study, clearly expecting her to follow. I'm having my investigators look into every business dealing Carter Shipping has had for the past 6 months. If there's anything questionable, we need to know before the Beaumonts find it. Evelyn's hands clenched. You don't trust me. I trust that you believe your uncle is innocent. That's not the same thing as knowing he is. Dominic poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one without asking if she wanted it. I've seen good people make terrible choices when they're desperate. Your uncle was facing bankruptcy. That kind of pressure makes people do things they wouldn't normally consider. He wouldn't. You don't know that. Not for certain. He drank, watching her over the rim of his glass. I'm not accusing him, Evelyn. I'm being thorough. There's a difference. She wanted to argue, to defend her uncle's honor with absolute certainty. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered doubt. The business had been failing. The contracts were being dropped. Dominic had mentioned restoring the Merchants Guild agreement. Had her uncle known about that? Had he been making deals, taking risks, trying to save everything before it collapsed? When will you know? She asked quietly. 24 hours. My people are good. He set down his glass. If he's clean, this dies here. If he's not, we deal with it. How? That depends on what they find. Dominic's expression softened slightly. But either way, you're protected. That was the agreement. Your uncle's choices don't define you. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like preparing for amputation, necessary maybe, but no less brutal for it. Evelyn drank the whiskey, welcoming the burn. What if you're wrong about me? What if I'm not worth this trouble? Then I've made a bad investment. Wouldn't be the first time. But his tone suggested he didn't actually believe that. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be complicated regardless of what we find. She made it to her room before the shaking started. Not fear exactly, something deeper, more primal. The realization that she'd just defended her uncle on pure faith, with no actual evidence beyond her belief in his character. And if that faith turned out to be misplaced, she'd destroyed her credibility in front of everyone who mattered. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by nightmares of photographs and accusations, and her uncle's disappointed face. Morning arrived with Mrs. Reeves and coffee strong enough to strip paint. His Grace requests your presence in his study, the housekeeper said. The investigators have reported. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Already? They worked through the night. Mrs. Reeves' expression was carefully neutral. I suggest you prepare yourself. The walk to Dominic's study felt like approaching an execution. Each step brought her closer to truth she might not want to face. The door was open when she arrived, Dominic standing at the window with his back to her. Come in, he said without turning. Close the door. Evelyn did, her hands ice-cold despite the warm morning. What did they find? Dominic turned and his expression was unreadable. Your uncle is clean, completely boringly legitimate. Every transaction documented, every meeting accounted for, nothing even remotely questionable. Relief crashed over her so hard she had to sit down. Thank God. But the words stopped her mid-breath. The men in those photographs, they're not connected to my business at all. They're Beaumont plants, low-level operatives paid to approach your uncle with fake business proposals. The whole thing was a setup. Fury replaced relief, hot and sharp. They tried to entrap him? Yes. And when that didn't work, they manufactured evidence by photographing normal business meetings out of context. Dominic's smile was cold, which means they've committed fraud, conspiracy, and attempted extortion, all of which I now have documented proof of. What are you going to do? Destroy them, said simply, like commenting on the weather. The Beaumont family has been a thorn in my side for years. This gives me the ammunition to remove them permanently. Evelyn stood, pacing the length of the study. They'll fight back. People like that don't go down quietly. Let them fight. They're operating from a position of weakness now. He moved to his desk, pulled out a folder thick with documentation. By noon, every business partner they have will receive copies of this evidence. By evening, the financial regulators will have opened investigations. By next week, Lord Beaumont will be too busy defending himself to think about you. It was ruthless, calculated. Exactly the kind of response she should have expected from Dominic Wolfe. And Eleanor? Evelyn asked. We'll learn a valuable lesson about the cost of desperation. No sympathy in his voice, just cold assessment. She had options. She chose to attack instead of accept reality. That's on her. Evelyn thought about Eleanor's face last night. The hatred and desperation mixed together. She'd loved Dominic, maybe. Or at least loved the idea of being his duchess. And now that dream was being systematically destroyed. She should have felt guilty. Instead, she felt satisfaction. There's something else, Dominic said, drawing her attention back. About your uncle. Tension returned, sharp and immediate. What? The Merchants Guild contract, the one that was dropped? He leaned against the desk. It wasn't actually dropped. It was blocked. By Lord Beaumont, who sits on the guild board. He's been systematically sabotaging your uncle's business for months, trying to make you desperate enough to accept any escape. The implications hit like a physical blow. Everything, the failing business, the mounting debts, even her presence at those society events, had been manufactured, orchestrated by the Beaumonts to force her into a position where marrying Dominic would seem like salvation. Except their plan had worked too well. She had married him, just not for the reasons they'd intended. How long have you known? Evelyn's voice came out flat. I suspected after the engagement announcement, confirmed it last night. Dominic met her eyes. I didn't tell you because I needed to verify everything first, and because I wasn't sure how you'd react. To learning that my entire life for the past year has been someone else's manipulation? Bitterness leaked through despite her attempt at control. How did you think I'd react? Honestly, I expected you to break. His admission was quiet. Most people would, finding out they've been puppeteered, that their choices weren't really choices at all. But you're not most people. No, I'm just the girl stupid enough to think any of this was real. It is real. Dominic moved closer, and there was something in his expression she hadn't seen before, almost like respect. They tried to control you, yes, but you made your own choices within those constraints. You survived their contempt. You stood up to Eleanor. You defended your uncle without knowing if he was guilty. Those were your decisions, not theirs. Decisions made in a cage they built. Maybe, but you're breaking out of that cage now, and you're doing it on your terms, not theirs. He pulled out another document, slid it across the desk. The Merchants Guild contract has been restored. Your uncle's creditors have been paid in full. His business is stable. Evelyn stared at the papers. Why? Because it was always part of our agreement, your uncle's protection. No, I mean, why are you really doing this? You don't need me. You could have found a dozen other ways to avoid Eleanor Beaumont. So why involve me? Why go to all this trouble? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, looking out over the estate grounds. Because I'm tired, he said finally. Tired of games where everyone's trying to use everyone else. Tired of people who see me as nothing but a title and a bank account. You didn't want anything from me, Evelyn. Not at first. You were just trying to survive. That's rare, valuable. So you collected me, like you collect everything else. No. He turned to face her. I offered you a choice, and you took it. That makes you a partner, not a possession. A partner you investigate without telling me. A partner I protect by being thorough. His voice remained steady. You can be angry about that. You have the right, but don't confuse caution with distrust. Evelyn wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the fury of being investigated, manipulated, pushed into choices that weren't entirely her own. But underneath the anger was something else. Relief that her uncle was innocent, satisfaction that the Beaumonts would pay for their scheming, and a strange, tentative trust in the man who'd promised to protect her and was actually following through. What happens now? She asked. Now, we finish what we started. Dominic pulled out a schedule already filled with appointments. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Between now and then, we destroy the Beaumont's credibility, solidify your position in society, and make sure everyone knows that you're not someone to underestimate. Sounds exhausting. It will be, but you've already proven you can handle it. A knock on the door interrupted them. Mrs. Reeves entered with a card on a silver tray. This just arrived by messenger, she said. Marked urgent. Dominic took the card, read it, and something that might have been amusement crossed his face. Interesting. What? He handed her the card. Evelyn read the elegant script, then read it again to make sure she'd understood correctly. Lady Constance Ashford requests the honor of your presence for tea this afternoon. Private discussion regarding matters of mutual interest. She wants to meet? Evelyn couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. After everything? She wants to negotiate. Dominic's smile was sharp. The Beaumont scandal is spreading fast. By now, everyone knows they tried to frame you with fake evidence. That makes you dangerous. Someone who can't be bullied or manipulated. People like Constance respect that. Or fear it. In this world, those are the same thing. He studied her expression. You don't have to go. You can send a refusal, maintain distance. What would you do? I'd go. But I'd go prepared. He pulled out his phone, made a quick call. Yes, I need surveillance set up at the Ashford townhouse. Afternoon tea, private meeting, full recording. No, she won't know. Thank you. Evelyn stared at him. You're bugging her house? I'm documenting a conversation where she'll likely try to manipulate you into some new scheme. This way we have evidence if she steps out of line. He said it like it was obvious. Never walk into an enemy's territory without insurance. She invited me for tea, not a battle. Tea is a battle, just with better china. Dominic's expression turned serious. These women destroyed you at that ball. They tried to erase you from society. Now you're about to become a duchess, and they're scrambling to figure out how to deal with you. Constance will smile and pour tea and try to recruit you to whatever game she's playing. Don't give her anything. Then why go at all? To show her you're not afraid, and to learn what she's really after. He checked his watch. You have 4 hours. Mrs. Reeves will help you prepare. Remember, you're not begging for acceptance anymore. You're allowing her the privilege of an audience. The shift in framing was subtle, but powerful. Not a nervous merchant's niece hoping for scraps, but a future duchess granting time to someone who needed something from her. Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Not confidence exactly, but determination. "All right," she said. "I'll go." The Ashford townhouse was exactly as pretentious as Evelyn remembered. All white marble and imported flowers and servants who looked through you if you weren't important enough. But walking through the door this time felt different. She wasn't arriving as a tolerated nobody. She was arriving as Dominic Wolfe's fiancée. The balance of power had shifted. Constance received her in a private sitting room overlooking the gardens. She was dressed impeccably, as always, her smile polished to perfection. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Wariness. "Miss Carter," she said, standing to greet her. "Or should I say Duchess Carter? The titles get so confusing during engagements." "Evelyn is fine." She accepted the seat offered, noting the expensive tea service already laid out. "You wanted to discuss something?" "Straight to business. I appreciate that." Constance poured tea with practiced grace. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior at the ball. It was uncharitable." The word was so carefully chosen, it was almost funny. Uncharitable. Not cruel, not calculated, not designed to destroy, just uncharitable. "Water under the bridge," Evelyn said, matching her tone for false warmth. "I'm glad you see it that way." Constance handed her a cup. "Because I think we could be valuable to each other going forward." There it was, the recruitment pitch Dominic had predicted. "How so?" "You're about to enter a world you don't fully understand yet. The games, the alliances, the unwritten rules. It can be overwhelming for someone from your background," said gently, like she was doing Evelyn a favor. "I could help guide you, introduce you to the right people, teach you how things work." "In exchange for—" Constance's smile widened. "Your husband's favor, of course. Dominic Wolfe holds tremendous influence. Having access to him through you would be mutually beneficial." It was the same play Senator Blackwell had tried, just wrapped in prettier packaging. Use Evelyn as a conduit to Dominic's power and money. "I'm not sure my fiancé would appreciate me trading on his influence," Evelyn said carefully. "Oh, he doesn't need to know. This would be between us, women supporting women." Constance leaned forward conspiratorially. "You're smart, Evelyn. Surely you see that having allies in this world is essential, and I can be a very powerful ally. Or a very dangerous enemy." The mask slipped for just a second. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Evelyn set down her teacup. "Let me be honest, Constance. I know what you're doing. You're trying to recruit me before someone else does. Trying to secure access to Dominic through me because you can't get it directly. And you think I'm naive enough or desperate enough to agree." Constance's expression hardened. "That's a crude interpretation." "It's an accurate one." Evelyn stood. "Here's my answer. No. I'm not interested in being your puppet, or anyone else's. I'm not going to spy on my husband, or trade information, or play whatever game you think I'm qualified for. You're making a mistake." The warmth had completely bled from Constance's voice. "Without allies, you'll be isolated, vulnerable." "Maybe, but I'd rather be isolated than owned." Evelyn moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Constance? The wine stain at your ball? It wasn't an accident, was it?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "That's what I thought." Evelyn smiled, sharp and cold. "Thank you for the tea. It was educational." She left before Constance could respond, walking out of the townhouse with her spine straight and her heart hammering. The conversation had been recorded. Dominic would have every word, and Constance had just confirmed what they'd suspected. The ball incident had been planned. The car was waiting where she'd left it. Evelyn climbed in, and the driver pulled away from the curb immediately. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dominic. Well done. She tried the recruitment angle exactly as predicted. You handled it perfectly. So he'd been listening in real time. Part of her should have been annoyed by the surveillance. Instead, she felt oddly reassured. Like having backup in a fight she was still learning to navigate. She texted back. She admitted the wine was deliberate. The response came quickly. I know. We have it recorded. That's assault, legally. Want to press charges? Did she? Evelyn thought about Constance's satisfied smile as wine had soaked through her dress, the laughter of the crowd, the humiliation that had led to everything after. No. But keep the recording. Insurance, smart. Come home. We need to discuss next steps. Home. When had she started thinking of the Wolf estate as home? The wedding preparations consumed the next 2 weeks in a blur of appointments and decisions. Dress fittings, menu selections, seating charts, all the machinery of society, weddings grinding forward with unstoppable momentum. But underneath the surface planning, real work was happening. The Beaumont scandal exploded across society exactly as Dominic had predicted. Financial irregularities were discovered. Business partners withdrew. By the end of the first week, Lord Beaumont had resigned from 3 boards and was facing criminal investigations. Eleanor disappeared from public events entirely, reportedly locked in the family estate while lawyers tried to contain the damage. Meanwhile, Evelyn's transformation accelerated. Not just clothes and jewelry, but actual education. Dominic's advisors taught her the intricate web of alliances and feuds that governed society. Who owed whom favors? Which families were rising or falling? How to read the social battlefield. She learned fast. Had to. Every public appearance was a test. Every conversation a potential trap. But slowly, something changed in how people looked at her. Not acceptance, not yet, but acknowledgement. She'd survived multiple attacks, defended herself against the Beaumonts, rejected Constance's recruitment. Each victory small in isolation, but together they painted a picture of someone who couldn't be easily broken. Someone dangerous in her own right. The wedding itself was smaller than traditional society affairs. 200 guests instead of 1,000, ceremony in the estate's private chapel instead of a cathedral. Dominic had insisted on keeping it controlled, manageable. Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in her bridal suite, barely recognizing herself. The dress was exquisite, cream silk and antique lace, the wolf sapphires at her throat. She looked like she belonged in this world. The illusion was almost perfect. You ready? Mrs. Reeves asked from the doorway. No. Honest answer. But I don't think that matters. It doesn't. The older woman smiled. You'll do fine. You've survived everything else they've thrown at you. The ceremony passed in a blur. Evelyn remembered walking down the aisle, her uncle's arm steady under her hand. Dominic waiting at the altar, his expression unreadable. Words spoken, vows exchanged, a ring, a new one, matching his, sliding onto her finger next to the signet. And then it was done. She was Evelyn Wolfe, Duchess, wife to one of the most powerful men in the realm. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, and this was where the real test came. Every society family of importance was there, all of them watching, assessing, calculating how to approach this new reality. Evelyn stood beside Dominic in the receiving line, accepting congratulations with practiced grace. But she was watching faces, reading reactions. Constance Ashford, forced to attend, her smile tight and false. Victoria Blackwell, subdued since her father's humiliation. Senator Blackwell himself, keeping distance, clearly afraid of further confrontation. Others she'd learned to recognize, allies and enemies, and those still deciding which camp to join. And then, near the end of the line, a face she didn't expect. Her uncle Marcus, looking uncomfortable in formal wear but genuinely happy. He pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. Guilt twisted in Evelyn's chest. He thought this was real, thought she'd found love and happiness, had no idea this was a calculated arrangement built on necessity. "Thank you," she managed. "For everything." When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "Your parents would be so proud. You've done well for yourself." Had she? Or had she just traded one kind of survival for another? The reception continued, champagne flowing, music playing, all the machinery of celebration grinding forward. Evelyn danced with Dominic, their first dance as husband and wife, moving through steps they'd practiced until they looked natural. "You're doing well," he murmured as they turned. "I'm terrified." "Good. Keeps you sharp." His hand tightened fractionally on her waist. "One more week of this intensity, then things calm down. You just need to survive until then." "What happens in a week?" "You stop being news. Someone else will do something scandalous, and the spotlight moves on." He guided her through a turn. "Then the real work begins." "This wasn't the real work?" "This was the performance. The real work is maintaining power once you have it." The dance ended to polite applause. Evelyn returned to Dominic's side, playing the role of happy bride while her mind spun with implications. She'd won. Sort of. She'd survived the attacks, married the Duke, secured her position. But the cost was still being calculated. The lies to her uncle, the manufactured relationship, the knowledge that none of this was quite real. As the evening wound down, guests departing with final congratulations and thinly veiled assessments, Evelyn found herself alone on the terrace. The city spread out below, thousands of lights marking lives being lived in blissful ignorance of the games being played above. Regretting it already? She turned to find Dominic behind her, jacket discarded, tie loosened. He looked more human like this, less like the calculated Duke and more like just a man. "No," Evelyn said honestly, "just processing." "Fair enough. It's been a complicated month." He joined her at the railing. "For what it's worth, you've exceeded every expectation I had." High praise from someone who expects perfection. "I don't expect perfection. I expect competence." He was quiet for a moment. "You've been more than competent. You've been brilliant." The compliment landed strangely. Evelyn had spent so long fighting for scraps of approval that genuine praise felt foreign. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, we build something real out of this arrangement. Not love. I'm not naive enough to promise that. But partnership. Mutual respect. Maybe even friendship, if we're lucky." He turned to face her. "You're not alone in this anymore, Evelyn. Whatever comes next, we face it together." It should have felt like a consolation prize. Instead, it felt like something solid, real, a foundation she could actually build on. "Together," she repeated, testing the word. "Together." And for the first time since that night at the Ashford ball, Evelyn felt something that wasn't quite hope but was close enough. She'd survived. More than that, she'd claimed power in a world designed to keep her powerless. The girl in the wine-stained dress was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone harder, sharper, unbreakable. Duchess Evelyn Wolfe. And she was just getting started. The honeymoon was a performance neither of them pretended to believe in. 5 days in the countryside estate, far enough from the city to suggest romantic isolation, close enough that business could continue uninterrupted. They occupied separate wings of the manor, maintained public appearances during meals, and spent evenings in their respective rooms working through the backlog of correspondence that came with their new status. It should have felt lonely. Instead, Evelyn found it oddly comfortable. No pretense between them when no one was watching, just two people who'd made a calculated arrangement and were figuring out how to live with it. On the fourth evening, Dominic knocked on her door with a bottle of wine and an expression she'd learned meant trouble. "We have a problem," he said, without preamble. Evelyn set down the letter she'd been reading, an invitation to join 3 different charitable boards, all of them clearly hoping to leverage her new position. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that requires your immediate attention back in the city." He poured wine into glasses he'd apparently brought with him. "Eleanor Beaumont is making a final play, and it's uglier than I expected. I thought the Beaumonts were finished. The investigations, the business failures. Financially, yes. Socially, they're wounded, but not dead." Dominic handed her a glass. "Eleanor's started a rumor campaign. Nothing she can be directly tied to, but effective. She's suggesting our marriage is a sham, that you trapped me somehow, that I'm being manipulated by a gold-digging merchant's daughter who's playing me for a fool." Evelyn's hands tightened on the glass. "Can she prove any of that?" "No. But she doesn't need to. Rumors don't require proof, they just require repetition. He sat across from her, his expression grim. By the time we return to the city, half of society will be whispering about it. The other half will be waiting to see how we respond. So we ignore it. Let it die from lack of fuel. That might work if we were established. But we're new, untested. Silence will be interpreted as confirmation. Dominic drank, considering. We need to address this directly, publicly, in a way that destroys the narrative completely. How? By showing them exactly what our marriage is. Not the romantic fantasy they expect, but something they'll respect even more. He leaned forward. There's a session of Parliament next week. The Lords will be voting on the railway expansion bill, the one Senator Blackwell was so interested in. I'm planning to speak against it. Evelyn frowned. Against? I thought you supported infrastructure development. I support smart infrastructure. This bill is corrupt, designed to funnel money to specific contractors who've paid for political influence. It'll pass unless someone with credibility stands up and exposes it. His eyes locked onto hers. I want you there, in the gallery, visible. Why? I can't vote. I can't even speak in the Lords. No, but you can be seen supporting me. And afterward, when the press asks questions, you can speak about why you support the position. Show them you're not just decorative. You understand the issues, you have opinions, you're a partner in this. It was a gamble. If she fumbled, said something naive or wrong, it would confirm every rumor Eleanor was spreading. But if she succeeded, what's really in this bill? Evelyn asked. Beyond corruption. Dominic's slight smile suggested approval of the question. Environmental destruction for profit. The proposed routes go through protected lands, indigenous territories, areas that should never be developed, all to save construction costs and maximize contractor profits. And the Lords will vote for it anyway. Most of them, because they're getting paid to, or because they don't care, or because they think one speech won't change anything. He finished his wine. But I'm going to try anyway, and I want them to see that my wife, a woman they dismissed as beneath them, understands what's at stake better than they do. Evelyn felt something click into place. This wasn't just about defending their marriage. It was about establishing who she was going to be as Duchess Wolfe. Not a pretty accessory, but an actual partner with her own voice. When do we leave? She asked. Tomorrow morning. The vote is in 3 days. That gives us time to prepare your statement. They spent the rest of the evening going over the bill line by line, Dominic explaining the implications of each clause. Evelyn took notes, asked questions, began to see the web of corruption and self-interest woven through what looked like standard legislation. By midnight, she had enough ammunition to make a real statement, if she could find the courage to use it. The return to the city felt different, like coming back to a battlefield after a brief ceasefire. The estate was buzzing with activity, servants preparing for visitors, correspondence piled high, the machinery of power grinding forward relentlessly. Mrs. Reeves met them with updates and warnings. The rumors are spreading faster than expected, she said, her expression tight. Several families have sent pointed questions about the marriage. Others are waiting to see how you respond before committing to alliances. Let them wait, Dominic said. We'll give them their answer soon enough. The next 2 days were intense preparation. Dominic's advisors briefed Evelyn on parliamentary procedure, likely questions from the press, how to handle hostile inquiries. They practiced her statement until she could deliver it without notes, with confidence, like she'd been doing this her whole life. On the morning of the vote, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in a deep navy suit, professional, serious, the kind of outfit that said she wasn't there to be looked at. The wolf sapphires at her throat were the only concession to formality. Ready? Dominic appeared in the doorway, already dressed, looking every inch the Duke about to face down Parliament. No, but that seems to be my default state lately. You'll be fine. Just remember, you're not asking for their approval. You're informing them of reality. They arrived at Parliament to a sea of cameras and reporters. Questions flew before they'd even exited the car. Duchess Wolfe, is it true your marriage is a business arrangement? Your Grace, how do you respond to allegations of manipulation? Miss Carter, Duchess Carter, do you actually understand the bills being voted on today? Evelyn kept her expression neutral, letting Dominic guide her through the crowd. But she made note of the faces, the questions, who was asking what. Later, she'd have answers for all of them. Inside, the Parliament building was all stone and tradition and centuries of accumulated power. The public gallery overlooked the main chamber where lords in formal robes were gathering for the session. Evelyn took her assigned seat, hyper-aware of the eyes tracking her every movement. Below, Dominic entered the chamber to a mix of acknowledgement and barely concealed hostility. He'd made enemies by opposing this bill. Today would either vindicate that choice or confirm his isolation. The session began with procedural matters Evelyn barely followed. But when the railway bill came up for debate, she leaned forward, every nerve focused. The first speakers were predictable, lords with financial interests in the contractors, reading prepared statements about economic growth and infrastructure necessity. Their arguments were polished but hollow, designed to sound reasonable while saying nothing of substance. Then Dominic stood. The chamber quieted immediately. Whatever else people thought of him, they respected his intelligence. When Duke Wolf spoke, you listened. You mean us? You suts, my lords, he began, his voice carrying across the chamber with natural authority. I rise in opposition to this bill. Not because I oppose progress, but because this bill represents the opposite of progress. It represents corruption disguised as development. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several lords shifted uncomfortably. Dominic continued, laying out the case with surgical precision. The environmental damage, the violation of protected territories, the contractors with documented histories of cost overruns and safety violations, the political donations that coincidentally aligned with voting patterns. He didn't just oppose the bill, he dismantled it, piece by piece, exposing every hidden clause and corrupt bargain. Evelyn watched the chamber's reaction. Some lords looked furious, others uncomfortable. A few, not many, but a few, nodded in agreement. When Dominic finished, the silence was heavy. Then Lord Hampton stood, an older duke, traditional, generally considered moderate. Your Grace makes serious accusations. Can you prove these alleged connections between contractors and political donations? Dominic smiled. I can, and I've submitted full documentation to the parliamentary record. Anyone interested in reviewing it is welcome to do so. The chamber erupted. Accusations flew, defenses were mounted, parliamentary procedure dissolved into barely controlled chaos. The speaker had to call for order 3 times. In the end, the vote was closer than expected. The bill passed, but by a narrow margin, with several lords switching their positions after seeing Dominic's evidence. It wasn't a victory, but it was a statement, and the press was waiting for more. Evelyn descended from the gallery to find reporters already gathering outside the chamber. Dominic was still inside, engaged in heated discussion with other lords, which meant she was facing this alone. Duchess Wolfe, a reporter pushed to the front. Do you support your husband's position on the railway bill? This was it. The moment she either proved herself or confirmed every rumor Eleanor had spread. Evelyn took a breath and stepped forward. I do support his position. Not because he's my husband, but because the evidence is clear. This bill prioritizes profit over people, environment, and basic ethical governance. Her voice carried, stronger than she'd expected. And before anyone suggests I don't understand the complexities, I've read the entire bill. All 300 pages. I've reviewed the contractor histories, the environmental impact studies that were conveniently buried, and the financial disclosures that show exactly who benefits. The reporters scrambled to keep up, cameras flashing. But aren't you just... Another reporter started. Just what? Just a merchant's daughter who shouldn't have opinions on policy? Evelyn cut through the question. Let me be clear. I didn't marry Duke Wolfe to play dress-up and attend parties. I married him because we share values about how power should be used. This vote today is a perfect example. The easy choice is to go along with corruption because it's profitable. The right choice is to stand against it, even when you'll lose. So you admit you expected to lose? Someone from the back. Expected? Yes. Accepted? No, there's a difference. She met the camera lenses directly. We knew this bill would likely pass, but by exposing what's in it, we've made it impossible for anyone to claim ignorance. The lords who voted yes today did so knowing they were supporting corruption. That's their choice, and their voters will remember it. What about the rumors that your marriage is A sham? A manipulation? A merchant's daughter trapping a duke? Evelyn's smile was sharp. Let me answer that with a question. If I were really just a gold digger playing my husband for a fool, would I be here defending an unpopular position that makes us both targets? Wouldn't I be home spending his money and avoiding controversy? The logic landed. She could see it in their faces, the shift from skeptical to considering. My marriage is a partnership, Evelyn continued. Not the fairy tale romance people seem to expect, but something more valuable. Mutual respect between two people who want to use their position to actually accomplish something. If that's disappointing to people who wanted a princess story, I'm sorry. But I'm not here to fulfill fantasies. I'm here to work. Dominic emerged from the chamber then, taking his place beside her with perfect timing. His hand found the small of her back. Support, not possession. Any other questions? He asked, his tone making it clear the interview was over. The reporters scattered to file their stories. Evelyn felt adrenaline still coursing through her veins, making her hands shake. Well, Dominic said quietly as they walked toward the exit, that was effective. I might have just made us even more enemies. Probably, but you also just became someone they can't dismiss. His slight smile was genuine. You did well. Better than well. The response to her statement was immediate and divided. Conservative lords condemned her presumption. A duchess speaking publicly on policy was unseemly, untraditional, overstepping her bounds. Several society matrons wrote scathing letters about proper feminine behavior, but others responded differently. Younger members of parliament praised her directness. Reform-minded groups quoted her statements in their own advocacy. Common people who'd never paid attention to parliamentary votes suddenly knew who Duchess Evelyn Wolfe was and what she stood for. Within a week, she had more influence than some lords who'd held their seats for decades. Eleanor's rumor campaign collapsed under the weight of Evelyn's very public competence. It's hard to claim someone is manipulating her husband when she's demonstrating independent thought and courage in front of the entire realm. But Eleanor wasn't finished. Wounded, desperate, she made one final play. 3 weeks after the parliamentary vote, an anonymous letter arrived at the estate. Evelyn found it on her desk, unmarked, the handwriting deliberately disguised. I know what you really are. I know this marriage is a transaction, and if you don't withdraw from public life immediately, I'll prove it to everyone. Inside was a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. Evelyn and Dominic in his study the night before their engagement, discussing terms. The angle suggested someone had been on the grounds, possibly with a telephoto lens. Her blood ran cold. Dominic, her voice came out steadier than she felt. We have a problem. He read the letter, examined the photograph, and his expression went absolutely glacial. She's bluffing. How can you be sure? Because if she actually had proof we discussed marriage terms before the public relationship began, she'd have released it already. This photo shows us talking. That's it. No audio, no context, nothing incriminating. He tossed it on his desk. She's desperate. This is a last attempt to scare you into hiding. What if she has more? What if he... She doesn't. Dominic's certainty was absolute. And even if she did, what would it prove? That we discuss terms before marriage? Lots of couples have practical conversations about money and expectations. That we aren't madly in love? We've never claimed to be. We've explicitly said our marriage is a partnership based on shared values. He was right. They'd been careful to frame their relationship as mutual respect rather than romance from the beginning. There was nothing to expose because they'd never lied about what this was. But the threat still felt real. What do we do? Evelyn asked. Dominic's smile was cold. We call her bluff. Publicly. 2 days later, they attended the Winterbourne Charity Gala, the biggest social event of the season, attended by everyone who mattered, and Eleanor Beaumont was there, relegated to the edges but present, watching with desperate eyes. Halfway through the evening, Dominic called for attention. The room quieted, hundreds of guests turning to face them. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom, my wife and I have been the subject of some rather creative rumors lately. Accusations of manipulation, transactional marriage, various other scandals designed to undermine our credibility. Evelyn felt every eye in the room lock onto them. This was it. The moment Dominic either destroyed Eleanor's last play or validated it. I want to address these rumors directly, Dominic continued, not by denying them, but by examining what they actually claim. That our marriage was arranged for practical reasons rather than passionate romance, that we discussed terms and expectations before the wedding, that we're partners in a shared enterprise rather than lovers in a fairy tale. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eleanor stood near the back, her face pale. All of these things, Dominic said clearly, are absolutely true. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, shocked silence from different quarters. Evelyn felt her heart stop. What was he doing? My wife and I, Dominic continued over the noise, entered into marriage with open eyes and honest conversations about what we wanted from the arrangement. We discussed finances, expectations, the practical realities of joining our lives. We didn't pretend to be something we're not. We built a foundation on respect and shared values rather than temporary passion. He turned to Evelyn, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not calculation, genuine respect. And I consider that the strongest possible foundation for a marriage. Because passion fades, romance becomes routine, but respect, partnership, shared purpose, those things grow stronger with time. Evelyn found her voice. We've never lied about what our marriage is. We said from the beginning, it's a partnership. And frankly, I'd rather have a partner I respect than a romance that burns out in a year. The room was silent now, processing this unprecedented honesty. So yes, Dominic said, his voice dropping but still carrying. Our marriage was arranged, calculated, built on practical considerations rather than love at first sight. And anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to share their concerns. But you'll be hard-pressed to find a couple in this room who didn't make similar calculations when choosing their spouse. We're just honest enough to admit it. The silence stretched. Then, from the crowd, someone began to clap. It was Lord Hampton, the moderate who'd questioned Dominic in Parliament. His applause was joined by others, slowly at first, then building. Not everyone participated. Some stood frozen in shock or disapproval, but enough people applauded to make the point. Honesty, apparently, was more shocking than scandal. Eleanor's face crumpled. Her final weapon, the truth about their arranged marriage, had been rendered powerless by Dominic's refusal to be ashamed of it. She fled the gala in tears, and no one followed her. The next morning, the papers were full of the story, but the headlines weren't what Eleanor had hoped for. Duke Wolfe defends practical marriage Duchess Evelyn, respect over romance. Honest arrangement shocks society. Opinion was split. Traditional elements condemned the admission as vulgar, unseemly, a degradation of marriage's sanctity. But younger generations, practical-minded people, even some surprised conservatives found themselves agreeing. Why shouldn't marriage be approached thoughtfully? Why pretend calculations weren't part of the equation for everyone? Within days, the scandal shifted from condemnation of their marriage to debate about marriage itself. And in that debate, Evelyn and Dominic were no longer the villains. They were the honest voices challenging generations of comfortable hypocrisy. 3 months after the gala, Evelyn received an invitation that made her pause. The Pemberton Foundation wanted her to join their board, not as decorative nobility, but as an active member with voting rights on fund allocation. She brought the invitation to Dominic that evening, still processing what it meant. They want me to help decide where charity money goes. Makes sense. You proved you can think critically about policy. Why wouldn't they want that skill applied to philanthropy? He was working through correspondence, barely looking up. Will you accept? I don't know. It feels like, I don't know, legitimacy? Like they're finally accepting me as real instead of just tolerating me because of you. Now Dominic looked up. Evelyn, you've been real from the beginning. They're the ones who are fake. Pretending bloodlines matter more than competence. This isn't them granting legitimacy. It's them finally recognizing what was always there. The words landed in a way Evelyn hadn't expected. She'd been so focused on proving herself to them that she'd forgotten she'd never actually needed their approval. She'd survived their contempt, built her own credibility, established her own voice. They hadn't given her power. She'd claimed it herself. I'll accept, she said, but on my terms. I want real involvement, not just a name on the letterhead. Of course, anything less would be insulting. She was halfway out the door when Dominic's voice stopped her. Evelyn? She turned back. I'm proud of you. I know I don't say that enough, but you've become exactly what I hoped when I first approached you. Someone formidable. The compliment settled warm in her chest. We make a good team. We do. His slight smile was genuine. Better than I expected, honestly. Over the following months, Evelyn's role expanded. The Pemberton Foundation was just the beginning. She joined 3 more charitable boards, started a scholarship fund for merchant-class children seeking education, and became a regular voice in policy discussions that had previously excluded women entirely. Not everyone liked it. She received hate mail weekly, mostly from people who thought she was overstepping proper feminine boundaries. But for every letter condemning her, there were 2 supporting her. Women who saw her as proof that they could have voices beyond their husbands. Young people who appreciated her directness. Even some men who respected competence over tradition. The estate itself changed too. Dominic had always run it efficiently, but Evelyn brought different perspectives. She reorganized the household staff to be more equitable, established education programs for servants' children, opened parts of the grounds for public access on specific days. Not because she was trying to be charitable, because it made practical sense. Happy, educated staff were more loyal and effective. Public goodwill translated to political capital. Every change served a purpose. You're thinking like a duchess now, Mrs. Reeves observed one morning. Not just playing the role, actually being one. Evelyn considered that. When had the shift happened? When had she stopped feeling like an imposter and started feeling like she belonged? Maybe it was the day she'd stopped asking for permission and started making decisions. Maybe it was the moment she'd realized power wasn't granted. It was taken and held through competence and will. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she'd been a duchess all along and everyone else was just slow to notice. A year and a half after the wedding, Evelyn stood in the same ballroom where she'd first met Dominic as his fiancé. But this time, she was hosting. The Wolf Foundation annual gala, her creation, her vision, her execution. The room glittered with society's elite, but the guest list also included merchant families, scholarship recipients, people who'd never been invited to events like this before. Evelyn had insisted on mixing the social strata, and despite predictions of disaster, it was working. People were actually talking across class lines, forming connections that would have been impossible a year ago. This is remarkable, Lord Hampton approached, genuine respect in his expression. You've managed something I've seen others try and fail at for decades, bridging social divides without making it feel forced. It's not charity, Evelyn explained. It's recognition that talent exists everywhere, not just in bloodlines. These merchant families have built businesses, created jobs, contributed to society. Why wouldn't we include them in conversations about its future? Indeed. My wife suggested I tell you, our daughter wants to attend your next policy discussion series. Apparently you've made politics interesting to young women who previously found it boring. Evelyn smiled. That's because we're discussing real issues, not just theoretical ones. Education access, workplace safety, environmental protection, things that affect actual lives. As Lord Hampton departed, Dominic appeared at her side with champagne. You're enjoying this, he observed. I am. Is that terrible? It's perfect. This is what I hoped you'd become, someone who uses power effectively rather than just hoarding it. He clinked his glass against hers. Though I'll admit, you've exceeded expectations. I thought I was getting a competent partner. Instead, I got someone who's reshaping society faster than I can keep up with. Having regrets? Not even slightly. His expression turned serious. I have a question, and I want an honest answer. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Okay. If you could go back to that night at the Ashford ball, before everything changed, would you? She thought about the girl in the wine-stained dress, humiliated and powerless. Thought about the desperate acceptance of a stranger's offer, all the compromises and lies and calculated choices that had followed. No, she said honestly, that version of me was dying slowly, being crushed by people who saw her as nothing. This version gets to fight back, gets to matter. Even if the path here was complicated and messy and built on arrangements instead of romance, I wouldn't trade it. Dominic nodded slowly. I'm glad, because there's something else I want to discuss. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just evolving. He set down his champagne glass. Our arrangement was always meant to be flexible, remember? Built on shared values, but able to adapt as circumstances changed. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere in the past year and a half, this stopped feeling like an arrangement to me. And I wanted to know if... He paused, seeming to search for words. If you felt the same. Evelyn's heart did something complicated in her chest. Dominic, you don't have to answer now. Or ever, really. The terms of our marriage don't require romantic feelings. I just wanted you to know that mine have developed beyond the original framework. It was the most vulnerable she'd ever seen him. The calculating Duke stripped down to just a man admitting he'd caught feelings he hadn't planned for. And Evelyn realized, looking at him, that she'd done the same thing. Somewhere between the fights and the victories and the late-night strategy sessions, she'd stopped seeing him as the stranger who'd saved her. She'd started seeing him as the partner who stood beside her, as someone she trusted, maybe even loved, though that word still felt too large to examine closely. The original framework was limiting anyway, she said carefully. Maybe it's time we renegotiated terms. His slight smile was hope mixed with uncertainty. What did you have in mind? A real partnership, not just strategic, emotional. We're already sharing everything else. Why not that too? Are you sure? We don't have to change anything. What we have works. It does work, but it could be better. Evelyn stepped closer. I'm not good at the romance part. I don't know how to be the fairy tale wife, but I know how to be honest. And honestly, I've started to care about you as more than just a convenient alliance. Dominic's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. That's more than enough. Romance is overrated anyway. I'd rather have honesty and partnership than pretty lies. They stood there for a moment, the gala continuing around them, their private understanding expanding into something new. Not perfect. Nothing about them had ever been perfect. But real. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the staff had retired, Evelyn found Dominic on the terrace where they'd stood after the wedding. The city spread below, alive with light and possibility. Remember when you said we might become friends if we were lucky? She asked. I do. I think we got luckier than that. He pulled her close, and it felt different from all the times before. Not performance, not calculation. Just genuine affection between two people who'd chosen each other repeatedly until the choosing became habit, became truth. What happens now? Evelyn asked. Now we keep building, keep fighting, keep proving that power can be used for more than just protecting privilege. His arms tightened around her. And we do it together, really together this time. Evelyn leaned into him, watching the city lights blur and sharpen. Below them, millions of people were living their lives, struggling, surviving, building their own futures. She was just one of them, despite the title and the wealth and the power. One person who'd refused to break when the world tried to crush her. One person who'd turned humiliation into strength, desperation into strategy, survival into triumph. The girl in the wine-stained dress was gone completely now. In her place stood Duchess Evelyn Wolfe, partner, strategist, force of nature in her own right, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. 5 years later, Evelyn sat in the parliamentary gallery again, watching Dominic present another bill. This one about education reform, expanding access to quality schooling regardless of class background. It was legislation they'd written together, drawing on her scholarship program's success and his political connections. Beside her sat a guest she'd never imagined hosting. Constance Ashford, older now, diminished by scandals and failed investments, had requested a meeting months ago. Not to attack or manipulate, but to apologize. It had taken Evelyn weeks to decide whether to accept. In the end, she had. Not because Constance deserved forgiveness, but because Evelyn deserved to move past the need for revenge. Your daughter, Constance said quietly, watching the proceedings below. She's remarkable. Evelyn's hand moved unconsciously to rest on her rounded belly, 6 months pregnant with their first child. A daughter they'd already named Victoria, after no one in particular, just because they liked the name. She will be, Evelyn said. Because she'll grow up knowing her worth isn't determined by what others think of her. Because she'll have parents who teach her that power is earned through competence, not inherited through bloodlines. "You've changed everything," Constance said, and it wasn't accusatory, just observation. "The way society operates, who gets included in conversations, what matters. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it possible. 5 years ago, you were too busy trying to destroy me to imagine I might build something better." Constance winced but didn't argue. "I was cruel. To you and many others. I'm sorry." The apology landed strange and incomplete. Sorry didn't undo the wine stain or the laughter or the years of casual cruelty, but it was something. "I accept your apology," Evelyn said carefully. "But understand, I'm not the same person you tried to destroy. That girl is gone. What exists now is someone you helped create through your cruelty. So thank you, in a way. You taught me exactly how power works in this world. I just learned to use it better than you did." Below, Dominic's bill passed with comfortable margin. Not unanimous, progress never was, but substantial. Real reform, built on months of negotiation and coalition building. When the session ended, he looked up at the gallery and found Evelyn's eyes. The connection between them was instant, tangible. Not the calculated arrangement from 5 years ago, but something that had grown through shared battles and late-night conversations and the gradual realization that they'd become each other's home. That night, back at the estate, they celebrated with quiet satisfaction. No massive party, just dinner together in the private dining room, discussing the bill's passage and what came next. "The education reform will take years to fully implement," Dominic said. "We'll need to monitor every stage, make sure it isn't gutted by bureaucracy or corruption." "We will," Evelyn agreed. "But that's the work. Building something real takes time." Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the flutter of movement inside. Their daughter, already making her presence known. "Do you think she'll understand?" Evelyn asked suddenly. "When she's older and asks how we met. When she learns our marriage started as a transaction." Dominic considered the question seriously. "I think she'll understand that love isn't always the lightning bolt people expect. Sometimes it's the slow burn of respect growing into trust, growing into something deeper. We didn't start with romance, but we built something more solid than most romantic marriages achieve." "You think what we have is love, then? Don't you?" Evelyn thought about it. Love had never been the framework they'd used. Respect, partnership, shared values. Those were the terms they'd built on. But somewhere in the past 5 years, those foundations had supported something that felt an awful lot like love. Not the fairy tale version, not the passionate declarations and dramatic gestures, but the quiet certainty that this person beside her was essential, that their partnership had transcended transaction into genuine bond. "Yes," she said finally. "I think it is, just not the kind anyone would write stories about." "I disagree." Dominic's hand covered hers on her belly. "I think our story is exactly the kind worth telling. Two people who chose each other strategically and ended up choosing each other emotionally, who built power together and used it to actually change things, who proved that arrangements can become real and calculated decisions can grow into genuine partnership." He was right. Their story wasn't traditional, but it was theirs. Built on honesty instead of fantasy, respect instead of romance, and a shared belief that power meant nothing if you didn't use it to build something worth leaving behind. The daughter growing inside her would inherit that legacy. Not just wealth and title, but the understanding that she could claim her own power, define her own terms, refuse to be broken by a world designed to crush people like her mother had been. That night, lying in bed with Dominic's arm around her and their daughter moving between them, Evelyn thought back to the girl in the wine-stained dress. The one who'd stood in a circle of predators and felt her world collapsing. The one who'd taken a desperate gamble on a stranger's offer because she had no other choice. That girl would barely recognize the woman Evelyn had become. Duchess, reformer, voice for people who'd previously had none. Mother-to-be. Partner to a man who'd started as calculation and become essential. The wine stain had long since been disposed of. The dress itself burned or donated. Evelyn couldn't remember which. But the memory remained. Not as trauma, but as transformation. The moment everything had broken open and forced her to rebuild herself into something stronger. The stain that had marked her downfall had indeed become the moment that forged her rise. And she'd do it all again, every messy, complicated step, to end up exactly here. In the morning, there would be more work, more bills to support, more reforms to fight for, more battles against people who preferred the old ways where power stayed concentrated in the same hands. But tonight, Evelyn Wolfe, merchant's daughter, duchess, warrior in silken sapphires, rested in the certainty that she'd claimed her place in this ruthless world. Not through birth or luck or fairy tale rescue, but through intelligence, courage, and the absolute refusal to stay broken. The woman once cast aside in a garden now stood at the center of a world she'd helped reshape. And she was just getting started.